Chapter 351. Jade Mountain County. The news of the Bayou County magistrate being assassinated shook the entire Jade Mountain County. How many years had it been since such a vile thing as murdering an official of the Imperial Court had happened in Yushan County? The last time they heard of such a thing was in North County, Yang County. They didn't expect Jade Mountain County to encounter it so soon. The county magistrate was furious and ordered all the constables to search every village and city in the county to find the culprit. Even if they only provided clues, they would be rewarded handsomely. Jade Mountain County, Zhou Xian County. The assassination of the Bayou County magistrate had affected the entire Jade Mountain County. Zhou Xian County was no exception. The county yaman's constables and Min Zhuang had already checked the villages one by one, looking for suspicious people. Within the county, all the inns, brothels and places that might be hiding people were searched 5 or 6 times in a day. The Zhou Xian County magistrate hid in the county office and didn't come out. He wasn't stingy with spiritual jades and activated the formation outside the county office to its strongest state. He also carried the protective treasure given by the Imperial Court with him to deal with any unexpected situations. The county magistrate of Bayou County was inexplicably infiltrated by someone and destroyed in body and soul. That thief could be an assassin from the Devil's Doctrine or a cultivator who hated the Imperial Court. If he could kill the county magistrate of Bayou County, he could also kill the county magistrate of Zhou Xian County. The Zhou Xian County magistrate sat in the office and looked at a middle-aged man. He said, "Magistrate Huang, I suggest you stay in the county office. It's obviously not peaceful recently. I heard that Hanyang County and Danyang County officials were also killed. It'll be safer if everyone stays together." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "I'm just a magistrate. Even if it's a culprit, I won't care. It's fine." With that, he slowly walked out of the county office. The Zhou Xian County magistrate looked at his back with dissatisfaction. Of course, he didn't keep Magistrate Huang in the county office for his safety. It was only because Magistrate Huang had level 4 supernatural power that he could feel more at ease with such an expert in the county office. Magistrate Huang walked out of the county office and passed through 2 streets before arriving in front of a house. As a magistrate, he didn't choose to live in the county office. Instead, he rented a small courtyard in a remote area of the county. He rented it for 14 years. He opened the courtyard door and entered. He saw a figure standing in the courtyard. The figure was tall and slender, and from the silhouette it should be a woman. The woman stood with her back facing the door. She wore a conical bamboo hat on her head. A black veil hung from the edge of the hat, covering her face. County Magistrate Huang looked at the figure and paused for a moment. The next moment he walked into the yard and closed the door. He looked up at the woman's back and shook his head. "I've waited here for 14 years. The woman turned around and looked at him through the black veil on his bamboo hat. There was a trace of melancholy on County Magistrate Huang's face as he muttered to himself, "For the past 14 years, I haven't had a good night's sleep. I knew that you would find me in the end. I wanted you to come, but at the same time I didn't want you to come. Why?" The woman's voice was cold, as if it didn't contain any human emotions. County Magistrate Huang said slowly, "The past 14 years have been too painful for me. I hope that you can set me free. However, I also know that if you come to find me, it means that you've already embarked on this path. This is a path of no return. The moment you set foot on it, there's no turning back." He looked at the woman and said, "Those who have passed away forever. Those who are still alive must live on even more." The woman said faintly, "Some people don't deserve to live." County Magistrate Huang was silent for a moment before he nodded and said, "Some people don't deserve to live, but can you let my family go? That matter has nothing to do with them." The woman was silent for a moment before she said calmly, "All right. Thank you." County Magistrate Huang heaved a sigh of relief and said, 14 years ago I sent them back to their hometown. I've waited here alone for you for 14 years. You've finally come." His voice was calm and there was a trace of relief in it. The woman looked at him and asked, "Why?" County Magistrate Huang knew what she was asking. He shook his head and said, "It's meaningless to talk about this now. Everyone has to be responsible for their mistakes. I'm indebted to you, sir. I've let you down." He faced the woman and knelt on the ground. There was a trace of relief in his voice as he said softly, "I'm sorry. After he finished speaking, his head slowly drooped. At this moment, this fourth realm cultivator's 3 souls and 7 spirits dissipated. A day later. In the courtyard. County Magistrate Zhou Xian stood in front of County Magistrate Huang's kneeling corpse. His expression was extremely gloomy. He gritted his teeth and said, "Arrogant, too arrogant. If I don't catch you, I'm not human." The Zhongshan County Magistrate lamented, "Sir Huang, oh Sir Huang. I've advised you to stay in the county office with me. Why didn't you listen? Great, now you've been killed by a criminal." County Magistrate Zhou Xian looked at County Magistrate Huang's corpse with a trace of doubt on his face. He frowned and said, "County Magistrate Huang's death doesn't seem like a homicide. It seems like his soul dissipated on its own." County Magistrate Zhou Xian asked, "What reason does he have to do this?" County Magistrate Zhou Xian shook his head and said, "I don't know. First he killed someone, then he disguised it as a suicide. Did he think he could fool me with such a clumsy method?" Within a few days, 2 officials under his jurisdiction had died. County Magistrate Zhou Xian's mana was surging. It was obvious that he was extremely angry. He said gloomily, "You stay in County Magistrate Zhou Xian and continue to track down the murderer. I'm going to Fairy's capital. I must make the Imperial Court investigate this matter thoroughly and give the people of my county an explanation." Li residence. Li Mu carried the lunchbox and walked out of the house. He had planned to bring breakfast for the Empress the next day. However, that morning he and Lu Hanyan were entangled in bed and missed the time. He had no choice but to raise the carp for another 3 days. He could not bring the fish soup to court. Before morning court, he passed the lunchbox to Mr. May. Mr. May opened the lunchbox and smelled it. He glanced at Li Mu and said, "At least you have a conscience." In the past, the morning court was mostly about trivial matters. There were no major issues. However, compared to the past, there were more unexpected situations today. There were officials from all over the country. Recently, there were more signs of demon sect activities in their jurisdictions. This caused some instability in the counties. County Magistrate Zhou Xian even came to Fairy's capital personally to report the murder of 2 officials in County Magistrate Zhou Xian. The officials were all filled with righteous indignation. Murdering an official of the Imperial Court. We must not let them off lightly. Damn demon sect. They are indeed a great threat to the Great Zhou. One day the Imperial Court will completely eradicate the evildoers of the demon sect. Some were indignant while others were puzzled. That's strange. Although the demon sect has always wanted to overthrow the Imperial Court, they rarely attack officials directly. An official thought for a moment and asked, could it be that the top scholar killed too many demon sect masters a few days ago and attracted the revenge of the demon sect? Once this was said, it triggered a new round of discussion. What's going on? You still don't know? It's said that when Commander Shangguan and the others were chasing after Cui Ming, they accidentally fell into Cui Ming's trap. It was Zhuang Yuanlang who helped them escape, took down Cui Ming, and even killed an expert from the Devil Sect. After that, Zhuang Yuanlang was listed as a wanted man by the Devil Sect. Said that the Devil Sect put a very high bounty on his head and attracted a lot of experts, but they were all killed by him. He killed more than 25th level experts, and there's even a rumor that even the great elder of the Soul Sect, the 6th level Nether Hell Saint, died in his hands. That's too exaggerated. More than 25th realm masters and 1 6th realm master. The top scholar's cultivation is only at the 4th realm. Although his cultivation isn't high, he must have a treasure bestowed by Her Majesty. I heard that in Jiangyin County, someone even saw the Empress's avatar descend. That Nether Hell Saint must have died in the hands of the Empress avatar. In the Imperial Court, the officials were discussing fervently. The topic quickly shifted to the demon sect and Li Mu. Many people were shocked to the point of disbelief when they heard that Li Mu had killed dozens of demon sect 5th realm masters. More than 25th realm masters. Among the 100 people standing in the Golden Palace, there were only 25th realm masters. Even if they were to calculate, it might not be enough for Li Mu to kill. In the Great Zhou's 36 counties, the county governors and county ministers were all 5th realm masters. There were less than 100 of them in total. If more than 20 of them were killed by the demon sect, the transcending state masters of the Great Zhou would probably join forces and attack the demon sect's lair. Moreover, other than the death of more than 25th realm masters, The demon sect also lost a branch sect's first elder and a sixth realm master. If they were to calculate if they only killed 2 minor officials of the imperial court to vent their anger, then the demon sect was already very rational. They were even more rational than the great Zhou court. It was inconceivable that a 4th realm cultivator could achieve such a feat. However, it also proved how much Her Majesty doted on Li Mu. She must have given Li Mu countless high-level fulu and magic treasures. She even sacrificed her own cultivation and sent her avatar to help him. Was this how a favored official should be treated? Even a favored concubine wouldn't be treated this way, right? Since ancient times, the emperors who were known for their incompetence actually doted on their demon concubines and demon empresses so much. Of course, their countries didn't escape the fate of being destroyed in the end. The 25th realm masters of the demon sect, including the Nether Saint, were killed by a 4th realm cultivator. They must have felt very aggrieved when they died. Some of the officials even felt that their deaths were unjust. Because their opponent wasn't Li Mu, but the great Zhou imperial treasury. They even guessed that if the person who wanted to kill Li Mu was a 7th realm master of the demon sect, the empress would probably come personally. So many experts of the demon sect had died, but the officials were only shocked for a moment. 2 7th rank officials had died, but the investigation had to be carried out. This was the principle of the imperial court. The Department of Offerings had sent 5 blessed realm offerings to Yu County with the Yushan County chief to chase after the culprit. This was enough to show how much importance the imperial court attached to this case. When Li Mu walked out of Crepe Myrtle Hall, he was very unconvinced. He had killed so many experts of the demon sect. This was a great contribution to the imperial court. Some bastard officials even wanted to blame the deaths of the 2 officials of Yushan County on him. What did this have to do with him? If the demon sect wanted to take revenge, he couldn't stop them. However, if those 2 officials had really died because of the demon sect's revenge, Li Mu would still feel very apologetic. If the trash of the demon sect wanted to take revenge, they could come to him. Why did they have to vent their anger on innocent people? When his cultivation improved a little more, he would equip the Fulu school with a bunch of heaven-rank Fulu. Sooner or later he would wipe out the nests of the 10 demon sects. After the imperial court, Zhou Yi returned to Chang'e Palace. Mr. Mei walked in with a soup bowl. "Your Majesty, this is the soup that Li Mu made for you. He gave it to me before the imperial court. He also told Your Majesty to drink it while it's hot." Zhou Yi could already smell her favorite Crucian carp tofu soup. It had been a long time since she drank the soup personally made by Li Mu. After Mr. Mei filled a bowl for her, she picked up the spoon and took a small sip. Then her brows furrowed slightly. "That's not right." Mr. Mei was surprised. "What's wrong? Doesn't it taste good?" Zhou Yi shook her head. "It tastes good, but it doesn't taste like what he made." She closed her eyes and counted with her fingers. Her expression was somewhat complicated. After drinking another mouthful of soup, she looked at Mr. Mei and said, "I think it's better to give her a title of nobility." Mr. Mei froze for a moment. He quickly realized who she was talking about. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Then the jade bracelet and the golden hairpin? No?" Chapter 352. Mr. Mei's visit today surprised Li Mu. She was here to reward Lu Hanyan on behalf of the Empress. Li Mu was a 5th rank official, and Lu Hanyan was also given a 5th rank title by the Empress. Although the rank of a lady was lower than that of her husband, there were many officials in the imperial court, and not all the wives of officials could have such an honor. In a family, the husband was an official in the imperial court and the wife was a lady. Only then could she be considered to have entered the circle of nobles. Li Mu had no interest in entering this circle. He just felt that this set of ladies' clothes looked beautiful on Lu Hanyan. Yimin, Miao Miao and the others happened to be in the residence. They urged Lu Hanyan to put on the dress and then surrounded her with envy. Like officials, a lady had a rank and salary. For a woman, having a lady's title was equivalent to entering the ranks of nobles. Yimin looked around and asked curiously, "Is this the only dress?" Lu Hanyan asked, "What else?" Yimin said, "Even if there isn't any precious jewelry, there should be silk or something like that." "Her Majesty is too stingy." Lu Hanyan defended the Empress and said, "Don't say that about Her Majesty. I didn't do anything and I got a lady's title. This is already Her Majesty's special gift." Miao Miao said, "Although you didn't do anything, brother-in-law did a lot of things. It's the same as what you did. In a few days you will be a real family." There was less than half a month before the wedding. Li Mu had prepared most of the things that needed to be prepared. Yinin, Miao Miao, and the others were here to accompany Lu Hanyan to shop. It just so happened that Li Mu was also on break, so he followed behind them and helped them carry their things. Shopping with women was a very troublesome thing. Li Mu bought things decisively and straightforwardly. Once he saw something he liked, he would pay the bill. They, on the other hand, had to pick and choose and shop around. Even though she was not short of money now, she still enjoyed this kind of thing. Lu Hanyan and the girls walked out of a rouge shop. On the street, a young man suddenly walked up and asked in surprise, "Miss Hanyan, is it really you?" Lu Hanyan looked at him and asked doubtfully, "You are?" The young man said, "I am Du Ming, a student of the Myriad Scroll Academy. I used to listen to you play a lot. Don't you remember me?" Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and replied politely, "Oh, it's young master Du, I remember." Du looked at her and asked, "Miss Hanyan, are you still there? Ever since you left, there weren't many musicians who were worth listening to." Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "I'm not there anymore." Du Ming asked, "I don't know which music house Miss Hanyan is playing in now. In the future I will definitely support you." "Oh right, I'm holding a banquet at the Fragrance House today. I don't know if Miss Hanyan can do me the honor." As soon as he finished speaking, someone suddenly patted his shoulder. Du Ming frowned. When he turned around, he was immediately frightened. He said in a trembling voice, "Li Mu, what do you want?" The people who were taken out of the academy by Li Mu were now either dead or sentenced. This caused him to be nervous when he saw Li Mu. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Treating my wife to a meal. I want to ask, what do you want to do?" Du Ming looked at him and then looked at Lu Hanyan. He was shocked, but he quickly came back to his senses. He immediately said, Sorry, I didn't know Miss Hanyan was your wife. I didn't mean to offend you. I'll leave now. After he finished speaking, he quickly left and didn't dare to look at Lu Hanyan again. Seeing Du Ming run away, Yinin smiled and said, "It's good to have brother-in-law. In the past, these people were always pestering us and couldn't be chased away. Now let's see who dares to bother Sister Hanyan." Not far away, Du Ming had already run far away and was still in shock. A few young people stood in place. One of them looked at him and asked, "Didn't you say you saw someone familiar? Why did you come back so quickly? Did you get the wrong person?" Du Ming looked in a certain direction and still couldn't believe it. He muttered, "How did Miss Hanyan become his wife?" When they heard this, they were all stunned. "What? That Li Mu has a wife? Didn't they say he was still a virgin?" Miss Hanyan? Could it be the top musician of the Great Music Workshop 2 years ago? Didn't she leave Shindu? How did she get involved with Li Mu? The name Lu Hanyan was quite famous in the divine capital. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also very good at music. She was loved by some people who liked music. Later on, she left the divine capital for no reason. In a small area, she caused quite a commotion. Other than liking her music, Du Ming also admired her. At that time, he was disappointed for a long time. This time, when he saw her in the divine capital, he was filled with surprise and joy. The flame in his heart that had been extinguished was reignited. Then it was extinguished by Li Mu's cold water. He looked in a certain direction and sighed. What a pity, what a pity. When the two of them returned home after shopping, Li Mu was carrying something in one hand and holding her hand with the other. A commoner saw this and said in surprise, "Lord Li, this lady is..." Li Mu smiled and explained, "She's my wife." The commoner was puzzled. "Is Lord Li married?" Li Mu replied, "Not yet, but it will be next month. If you have time, come and join the wedding. Congratulations, Lord Li. Congratulations. Mrs. Li is so beautiful. She and Lord Li are a perfect match. I wish Lord Li and Mrs. Li a long life together and have a child soon." They walked through the streets and alleys. From time to time, the commoners would ask questions. Li Mu patiently explained to each and every one of them. Listening to the blessings of the commoners, Lu Hanyan's face was filled with shyness, but her eyes were filled with happiness. Li Mu had always been a hot topic in the divine capital. In the past half a year, every discussion in the divine capital was related to him. Once the news of him getting married on the 9th of the next month spread out, it quickly became the topic of the commoners' discussion. "I wonder which lady is so lucky to be able to marry Lord Li. I really envy her. Sigh, poor old man's 3 beautiful daughters. They're about to give up. I wonder if Lord Li will accept concubines? Forget it. Lord Li has done us a favor. If you want to repay kindness with enmity, we won't allow it. I saw that lady just now. She's very beautiful. She's worthy of Lord Li. Lord Li reminded me of that Lord Li from more than 10 years ago. He was also a good official who made decisions for the commoners. I think his surname was also Li. Unfortunately, Sai, I remember too. Unfortunately, Lord Li didn't meet a wise ruler. The previous emperor wasn't Her Majesty the Empress. The house Lord Li is living in now is the Li residence from back then. Those who killed him back then will die a horrible death. Shu, you don't want to live anymore. If someone hears you, even if you have 10 heads, it won't be enough to chop them off. The 7th of the 10th month. Today was not a special day. The residences of some officials and nobles were as usual. However, the market where the commoners lived was as lively as a festival. 2 days later was the day of Lord Li's wedding. From today onwards, many shops in the divine capital would sell their goods at a discount to celebrate the occasion. Some commoners hung large red lanterns in front of their houses even though there was no joyous occasion. The streets and alleys were pasted with the word, happy. Those who knew would naturally know that Lord Li was getting married. Those who didn't know would think that His Majesty was appointing an empress. Even when the previous emperor appointed an empress, the commoners didn't celebrate spontaneously like this. Countless officials in the imperial court didn't like Li Mu's way of doing things. However, when they saw this scene, they couldn't help but admire him from the bottom of their hearts. As an official, what more could he ask for? As the 9th of the 10th month approached, the streets and alleys were discussing the upcoming wedding. A woman wearing a bamboo hat slowly walked onto the streets of the divine capital. Although her attire was different from ordinary people, it didn't attract any special attention. There were always some people who didn't want to show their faces in public for some special reason. It wasn't uncommon for them to wear veils or cloaks when they went out. The woman seemed to be very familiar with the divine capital. She walked through the streets with great familiarity. Finally, she walked into the north court and stood in front of a tall door. The words Li Residence were written on the plaque in front of the door. The woman's gaze passed through the black veil of her bamboo hat and stared at the 2 words for a long time. This family seemed to have a joyous occasion recently. There was red satin hanging on the plaque. The word, happy, was also pasted on the 2 large red lanterns. Creak. The door opened from the inside. An unusually beautiful girl around 18 or 19 years old walked out. She asked in confusion, "Sister, who are you looking for?" The woman didn't answer. She slowly turned and left. Xiaobai closed the door and walked back. Wanwan poked her head out of the garden and asked, "Who is it?" Xiaobai shook her head and said, "I don't know. She must have entered the wrong door." Outside the door, the woman walked 100 steps before a peddler carrying a load walked over. The woman stopped the peddler and pointed at the residence in front. She asked softly, "Excuse me, may I ask who lives in the Li residence in front?" The peddler thought that someone was buying and was just feeling happy. However, when he heard that the woman was asking for directions, he became rather displeased. However, when he looked in the direction the woman was pointing at, he immediately beamed with joy again. He put down his load and said, "Miss, you must be a foreigner. If you're from the divine capital, you definitely know who lives there. Lord Li is the justice in our hearts. He doesn't fear the powerful and has redressed the grievances of countless people. This residence was bestowed to him by the Empress." Speaking of Lord Li, the peddler began to talk endlessly. At a certain moment he saw 2 figures walking over from the front. He said, "What a coincidence. That's Lord Li and his wife. Miss, don't you think they're a match made in heaven?" There was no sound from beside him. The peddler turned around and suddenly shivered. There was no one beside him. There was no girl. It was noon and the sun was warm, but he felt a chill rushing from his tailbone to his brain. He grabbed his load and ran toward the crowded street. In front of the Li residence, Li Mu held Lu Hanyan's hand. Just as he was about to step through the door, he suddenly sensed something and turned to look in a certain direction. There was only a peddler carrying a load there. For some reason he was running for his life. Lu Hanyan saw him stop and also looked back. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Let's go in." Chapter 353. At that moment, Li Mu inexplicably felt a strong throbbing in his heart. For cultivators who had refined their 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, it was rare for them to have such a feeling. Most of their senses had a reason, but when Li Mu looked over, he did not find anything. The two of them walked into the house and the door of the Li residence closed. In a shallow alley in the north court, in a place that Li Mu could not see, a woman leaned against the wall. Her face under the cloak was extremely pale. The 8th of October. There was only one day left until the wedding day. Lu Hanyan returned to the great music lane, which she regarded as her maiden home. Tomorrow, Li Mu would bring her back in a palanquin with 8 carriers. As the wedding day approached, Li Mu became leisurely. He did not invite many people and there were not many guests coming tomorrow. Fu Daozi was still in seclusion. Yu Zhenzi and Hyun Jinko came as representatives of the Fulu school. Although the headmaster and the other peak chiefs did not come, they still sent their gifts. The talismans on Li Mu's body had been almost used up in the battle with the killers of the Devil's Doctrine. He took advantage of this wedding to replenish them. Hanja and junior sister Qin also came with Yu Zhenzi and the others. Hanja looked at Li Mu with regret and said, "Actually, I thought that you and Li..." Before he could finish, he was kicked by Li Si behind him. Zhou Xian covered his mouth from behind and dragged him away. After a while, Hanja came back and said, "No matter what, congratulations to you for marrying such a good woman like Martial Aunt Lu. I wonder where my future Dao companion is now." Junior sister Qin casually walked in front of Hanja, coughed softly and puffed out her small chest. Hanja glanced at junior sister Qin and looked at Qin Miao Miao, who was standing beside Li Si and had lost a lot of weight. He said, "Even Li Si has junior sister Qin. God is really unfair." Qin Miao Miao also came with Li Si this time. She had an earth elemental body. Before her cultivation reached a high level, her body shape would be different from ordinary people. But after cultivation she was much thinner than before. Of course, even if she had lost half of her weight, Li Si still looked like a little bird standing beside her. Li Mu's eyes inadvertently glanced and saw a figure passing by outside the door. He was surprised and did not know why Zhou Xian would appear here. Calm. Other than his 2 old friends Zhang Chun and Li Si, Li Mu did not invite any of the officials of the court. Zhou Xian belonged to the opposing camp. He could not have come to congratulate Li Mu on his marriage. Li Mu walked out of the gate and saw Zhou Xian standing beside the carriage looking at the gate of the Li estate. Li Mu walked over and asked, "Assistant Minister Zhou, is something the matter?" Zhou Xian looked at the plaque of the Li estate and said indifferently, "Nothing." Li Mu remembered that Zhou Xian had once said that this was the residence of a friend of his. The original owner of the Li estate seemed to have been a criminal official, but Li Mu did not know what crime he had committed. These 2 days were good days. He could temporarily put aside the matter of the camp. Li Mu said, "Assistant Minister Zhou, do you want to go in and have a cup of tea before you leave?" Zhou Xian shook his head and said, "Today is the death anniversary of my old friend. I am not in the mood for tea." Li Mu's face darkened. The little good impression he had of Zhou Xian disappeared. Bang! Li Mu walked through the gate, and the gate of the Li estate closed with a loud bang. Even if today was the death anniversary of his old friend, he should not have said it in front of Li Mu, who was about to get married. If he was not the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, being caught and beaten for speaking so rudely before someone's wedding was already a light punishment. If he met someone with a bad temper, he would probably be hung up and beaten. Tomorrow was the day of the wedding. Li Mu did not want to be affected by these matters. He took a deep breath and threw Zhou Xian to the back of his mind. The 9th day of the 10th month. The festive atmosphere in the divine capital reached its peak on this day. Li Mu had too many labels on him. The top scholar, the empress favored minister, the divine capital's righteous sky. At noon, when he rode on his horse and married his bride, the streets of the divine capital were empty. There were only a few tables set up for the wedding banquet in the Li estate. However, on the wide street outside the Li estate, the crowd was crowded with heads and feet. There was a row of long tables on both sides of the street outside the estate. No matter the identity of the guests, they could drink a cup of wine here. The commoners lined up outside the Li estate, fighting to be the first to present congratulatory gifts. Some gave half a piece of cloth while others gave a pair of red candles. Although they were not valuable, it was a token of their sincerity. The entire northern court had never been so lively since the day it was built. Of course, to the high officials and nobles who were used to the tranquility of the northern court, this was noisy. An official sat in his own courtyard. Hearing the noise outside the door, he said unhappily, "So annoying. Isn't it just a wedding? Why do they have to make such a big scene?" His wife stood beside him and said, "They did not make such a big scene. This is the celebration of the commoners. When master can make the commoners like this, I will wake up laughing in my dreams." The official pursed his lips and said unhappily, "What's the point of winning over these unruly commoners? He doesn't have many friends in the imperial court." His wife looked at him and said disdainfully, "Those in the imperial court can be considered friends. They call you friends on the surface, but who knows how they are scheming against you behind your back." In another mansion, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel stood in the courtyard. He was not affected by the noise outside at all. He walked into the study and asked, "Are you sure?" An official in the study said with a gloomy face, "Tianhe County Minister Ho Bai, Ani County Magistrate Ding Yun, Baiyu County Magistrate Deng Zhou, and Zhou Xian County Magistrate Huang Ding. Sir, don't you think these names are familiar?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel narrowed his eyes and said, "It is indeed the four of them." The official said, 14 years ago, the four of them were all in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. They were also involved in that incident. 14 years later they were killed one after another. These cases were not done by the demon sect. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "You mean that someone is avenging that person?" The official said, "There is no other possibility." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel narrowed his eyes and said, 14 years have passed and they are still so persistent. Who could it be? Did someone from the Li family escape the net? The official thought for a moment and said, "The entire Li family was wiped out back then. There can't be anyone who escaped the net." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel scoffed and said, "No matter who it is, just capture them and deal with them. If he can make a move on these four people, he won't let other targets go. He probably doesn't have the guts to do so in Shindu. Check where the officials who were involved in this incident are now." The official said, "I've already checked. There was a minister counselor back then. He is now in Yantai County as the Yantai County Magistrate. He is at the peak of the fourth realm. From the looks of these cases, the culprit's strength is not higher than the fifth realm. Should we inform the Office of Worship and have them deal with that person outside to avoid unnecessary trouble?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel laughed mockingly and said, "Unnecessary trouble? Haha, if you want to overturn that case, you have to overturn the imperial court first. No one has the ability to do that. Whether it is the new party or the old party or His Majesty, none of them will let that happen." The official asked, "Then what do you mean?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "Have the people from the Department of Offerings guard Yantai County. According to the law, the culprit should be brought back to Luoyang to be punished for murdering an official of the imperial court. Have them follow the rules and don't do anything unnecessary. Bring him back to Luoyang. I'd like to see who is so overconfident." The official nodded and said, "Yes." A moment later he walked out of the residence of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and passed through the bustling crowd outside. When he passed by the Li Manor, he even looked inside curiously. In the Li Manor, the wedding ceremony had already begun. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan did not have any relatives. They were only friends in the manor. Mr. Mei was the host of the wedding. He stood in front with a smile on his face. "First bow to heaven and earth. Second bow, if there are no parents, then bow to master. Husband and wife bow to each other. Send them to the bridal chamber." Tonight was a joyous night in the Li Manor. Both inside and outside the manor were filled with jubilation. In the bridal chamber, Li Mu slowly lifted Lu Hanyan's veil. The two looked at each other and raised their wine cups. As their arms crossed, countless bright fireworks rose into the night sky outside the window, blooming with dazzling colors. In a wine shop in Shindu, the bright fireworks lit up the night sky and also illuminated the beautiful face of the woman in the wine shop after she took off her bamboo hat. She picked up the wine jar and finished it in one gulp. Putting on her bamboo hat, she turned and walked out of the wine shop. Looking in the direction of the fireworks, she whispered, "Congratulations, Changle Palace." Zhou Yi leaned lazily on the chair and took a sip of wine. He frowned and said, "What kind of tribute wine is this? It has no taste at all. Don't send it next year." Chapter 354. The past night was destined to be a sleepless night for many people in the divine capital. The famous Lord Li had just gotten married. Who knew how many women in the divine capital were sad? He was the top scholar in both civil and military affairs, the empress' favorite, the messenger of justice and the people's justice. He was also so handsome. For the young women in the divine capital, he was undoubtedly the ideal husband candidate. Especially for such a man. He hadn't even gotten married yet. Some women who thought they were pretty would intentionally or unintentionally linger in front of the Li Manor, fantasizing about having a romantic encounter with him and becoming the mistress of the Li Manor in the future. Before Li Mu's wedding they still had some hope. Now their hopes were dashed. They couldn't feel any jealousy towards that lucky woman. They could only wish them happiness. Li Manor. The sun had already risen to the top of their heads. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan walked out of the room. Lu Hanyan's face was rosy. She hid the smile in her eyes. Li Mu on the other hand was gloomy and unhappy. Just last night the two of them finally had their first yin-yang dual cultivation. The process of dual cultivation was undoubtedly very happy. But the result was unacceptable to Li Mu. Last night their yin and yang merged. Many years of pure yang and pure yin power flowed in their bodies. Lu Hanyan's cultivation successfully broke through to the 5th level. Li Mu's cultivation also experienced a surge, but he was still stuck at the peak of the 4th level. He was still one step away from the 5th level. However, this step was the most difficult step. Some people could take this step in a few days. Some needed half a month. Some took 3 to 5 years. Some took 30 to 50 years. There was no pattern. Li Mu started cultivating before Lu Hanyan. He was also the one who led her onto the path of cultivation. But she broke through to the 5th level before Li Mu. Li Mu was so angry that he trembled. Was he destined to be under a woman for the rest of his life? Damn the heavens. They were both yin and yang dual cultivators. This was too unfair to him. Lu Hanyan held his arm and comforted him. Don't be discouraged. Maybe you'll break through in a few days. In the future I'll protect you. Although she was comforting Li Mu, there was an unconcealable pride in her tone. Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Do I look like someone who needs a woman's protection?" As he spoke, his voice became softer and softer. Because he realized that he really was that kind of person. In terms of safety they used to rely on Li Qing, then Su He and then the Empress. In terms of finances, they had always relied on Lu Hanyan. Only when he thought about it carefully did he realize that he had been relying on women all this time. Now that even Lu Hanyan's cultivation was higher than his, Li Mu couldn't help but feel a little sour in his heart. What son of heaven? Maybe he was just a son adopted by the heavens. After the meal, Li Mu decided to enter the palace. Yesterday's wedding went so smoothly. In fact, to a large extent it was thanks to the Empress. Li Mu didn't have any maids or servants at home, so she asked Mr. Mei to bring some maids from the palace. The dishes at the wedding banquet were prepared by the imperial chef she sent to the palace. The wedding wine prepared for the guests was also the tribute wine she sent from the palace. Although she didn't come herself, she asked Mr. Mei to arrange his wedding very well. Changle Palace. Li Mu walked into the hall. The Empress, who was reading the memorials, didn't even raise her head. She asked, "Why did you come to the palace instead of staying at home with the bride?" Li Mu handed a few food boxes with dishes he made to Mr. Mei and said, "Your Majesty helped me with my wedding. I'm here to thank you." Zhou Yi looked up at him and said, "If you really want to thank me, then help me read these memorials. There are endless memorials every day. It's so annoying." Li Mu found that the Empress was becoming more and more presumptuous after they became familiar with each other. There are endless memorials every day. It's so annoying. Is this something an Empress should say? Even if she was really annoyed, she couldn't say it out loud. Wise emperors were all busy at night. Only a fatuous emperor would be annoyed by the memorials. If this sentence was written down, it would leave a bad name in the future. In the past, she would still pretend and put on airs in front of Li Mu. Now she didn't even want to pretend. Li Mu wanted to help her, but the harem couldn't interfere with politics. How could a minister help the emperor deal with memorials? If this was known, a favored minister would never be able to get rid of the label of messing up the government. Li Mu shook his head and said helplessly, "Your Majesty, this isn't very good." Zhou Qian looked at him disappointedly and said, "I understand now. You used to say that you would go through water and tread on fire for me, but it was all fake. You weren't even willing to help me look at the memorials, let alone go through water and tread on fire." Li Mu walked up and said helplessly, I'll see, okay. The Empress completely revealed her true nature in front of him today. She didn't even pretend anymore. She even used Li Mu's words to trick him. If Li Mu refused, it would mean that what he said to the Empress before was all false. Mr. May put the food in the food boxes on the table. Li Mu picked up the pile of memorials and went to the corner. The memorials presented by each ministry were sorted according to their importance. The Empress had already dealt with the most important memorials. The rest were the less important ones. There were 36 counties and hundreds of counties in the Great Zhou. Even though the ministries had solved most of the problems, there were still many things left for the Empress to deal with. Zhou Yi was eating leisurely at the side. She glanced at Li Mu and said, I haven't seen you for a few days. Your cultivation has improved a lot. Li Mu explained, because I have a pure yang body and my wife has a pure yin body. When pure yang and pure yin mixed together, it would produce an incomparably strange power. It had the effect of increasing mana and breaking through the barrier of cultivation. Li Mu didn't say it explicitly, but anyone could understand what he was implying. He meant that last night they mixed their yin and yang. Zhou Yi instantly felt that the food in front of her didn't smell so good. Not only that, Li Mu's words made her involuntarily think of the scene of their yin and yang mixing together. She, who had never experienced such a scene, wouldn't have thought of it. But she happened to see Li Mu's dream. The more she wanted to forget, the clearer the scene became. She could erase other people's memories, but she couldn't erase her own. If her memories were lost, her inner demons would still exist. This would cause her even more trouble. Her inner demons could be suppressed with the art of clear mind, but some thoughts couldn't. The courtier that originally belonged to her had become another woman's husband. They lived in the house that she bestowed upon them and used the things that she bestowed upon them. She couldn't even go there anymore. Zhou Qian admitted that she was a little envious. After having a wife, Li Mu's thoughts couldn't be wholeheartedly focused on the palace. He hadn't used the spirit snail she gave him for a long time. What made her feel conflicted was that she felt that Mei Wei was right. Although Li Mu was her minister, he should also have his own life. She shouldn't be too demanding of him and shouldn't be too possessive of him. But why did she still feel so uncomfortable? It was as if her sisters had taken away her beloved doll when she was young. At this moment, the closer she got to Li Mu, the more chaotic her heart became. She put down her chopsticks, stood up and said, Look first. I'm going out for a walk. The Empress chose to be an empress who didn't do anything. Li Mu could continue to help her deal with the memorials. She didn't know about these memorials until she saw them. She didn't know that being an empress was so difficult. There were already a lot of things to do in the 36 counties of Great Zhou. As the superior country of Zhuzhou, Great Zhou also had to deal with the affairs of other countries in Zhuzhou. In some small countries there was a coup d'etat. The orthodox royal family would ask for help from Great Zhou. There were also some small countries that were invaded by demons and demons. They couldn't resist with their own strength, so they would ask for help from Great Zhou. The ministers didn't have the right to make these decisions. In the end, it was up to the Empress to make the decision. Li Mu couldn't make these decisions for the Empress, so he picked out these memorials and put them aside. As for the matters within the Great Zhou dynasty, especially after the various levels of approval, as long as the Empress's written instructions were approved, Li Mu would approve them for her. After he finished dealing with the memorials, the Empress still hadn't returned. Li Mu left Chang'e Palace and went to the Secretariat. In addition to helping the Empress, he also had his own matters to deal with. When Li Mu walked into his office, he found that there were a few more booklets on the table in his office. Among the 6 officials of the Secretariat, he was in charge of the Ministry of Justice. He was the busiest. Li Mu opened a few memorials and found that they were from Yushan County. Yushan County's Baiyu County Magistrate and Zhongshan County Magistrate were suspected to have died in revenge from the demon sect. The Yushan County Magistrate had personally come to the Immortal's capital to report this matter, which was a step faster than the memorials from the county government. The Imperial Court had already sent the Consecration Department to investigate this case. They just had to wait for the results. Li Mu flipped through the 2 memorials and put them aside, preparing to read the next one. He had already picked up a new one, but he seemed to have realized something and put it down again. Li Mu opened the 2 memorials again and put them together. He found that the Baiyu County Magistrate and Zhou Xian County Magistrate had both been transferred out of the Ministry of Personnel before they went to work. Moreover, their official positions were in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. There was only a difference of a few months when they were transferred out of the Ministry of Personnel. If he remembered correctly, the Ani County Magistrate and Tianhe County Magistrate who had died seemed to have experience as officials in the Ministry of Personnel. However, Li Mu did not know what official position they had in detail. Within half a year, 4 officials from the Ministry of Personnel had died. This was too much of a coincidence. If the deaths of the first 2 officials and the 2 officials from Yushan County were committed by the same culprit, then this case had nothing to do with the demon sect. The imperial court had investigated in the wrong direction, because from the timeline when the first 2 officials died, Li Mu had not yet provoked the demon sect. After discovering the connection between these cases, Li Mu went directly to the Ministry of Justice. He found the director of the Ministry of Justice and asked, who was investigating the assassination of the 2 officials from Hanyang County and Danyang County? The director of the Ministry of Justice said, it was Manager Wei. Li Mu said, let him come. The director of the Ministry of Justice walked out of the yamen and quickly found Wei Peng. Li Mu looked at Wei Peng and asked, what position did the Tianhe County Magistrate and Ani County Magistrate hold in the Ministry of Personnel? Wei Peng thought for a moment and said, Manager of the Ministry of Personnel. Li Mu was surprised. Manager of the Ministry of Personnel again. After saying that, he continued to ask, do you know when they were the managers of the Ministry of Personnel? Wei Peng clearly remembered this matter very clearly. He did not think too much and said, about 12 or 13 years ago. The 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel at the same time had all been promoted in half a year. Then 12 or 13 years later, within half a year, they all died of unnatural causes. What this meant was self-evident. Li Mu frowned slightly and muttered, what happened during that time? Chapter 355. Li Mu had originally thought that these cases were the work of the demon sect. However, when he followed the clues to this point, he was shocked to find that things were not as simple as they seemed. 3 counties and 4 counties for cases, all pointed to the Ministry of Personnel. If these 4 cases were all done by the same person, then the severity and viciousness of these cases would be raised by several levels. Li Mu immediately made a decision and said, someone, come with me to the Ministry of Personnel. The director of the Ministry of Justice glanced at Wei Peng and said, why aren't you following Lord Li? After analyzing the clues of these cases, Li Mu believed that the final answer lay in the Ministry of Personnel. The Ministry of Personnel was not far from the Ministry of Justice, so they arrived quickly. Wei Peng was already a frequent visitor to the Ministry of Personnel, so he quickly sent for detailed information on the 4 assassinated officials. Managers of the Ministry of Personnel at the same time, promoted at the same time and assassinated at the same time. Li Mu looked at the 4 sets of information and said, there should be another one. Check who else was promoted at the Ministry of Personnel during that time. After the minor official flipped through the files, he said, there's one more person, Lord Yu, who was the minister counselor at the time. After the 4 managers were promoted, he was quickly transferred to Yantai County and promoted to Yantai County Lieutenant. Li Mu could already guess that the reason for these people's promotions more than 10 years ago was probably the reason for their deaths more than 10 years later. Obviously, as long as he found out why they were promoted more than 10 years ago, he would be able to find out the identity of the mastermind behind these cases. Li Mu continued to ask, do you know the reason for their promotions? The minor official shook his head and said, I've only been in the Ministry of Personnel for 3 years, so I don't know what happened more than 10 years ago. If Lord Li wants to know what happened more than 10 years ago, you can ask me directly. Seeing a middle-aged man walk in, the minor official immediately bowed and said, Lord Assistant Minister. Li Mu looked at the man, his eyes slightly focused, and said calmly, Assistant Minister Chen. Li Mu and this left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel had quite a bit of enmity between them. The wife of the county magistrate of Yang County who was killed by Xiao Yu was this person's sister. At that time, the enmity between him and Li Mu had already been formed. After that, Li Mu came to the divine capital and scolded this person in the imperial court. He didn't leave him any face, and this caused the enmity between them to deepen. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said slowly, more than 10 years ago, there was an official in the Ministry of Personnel who colluded with the enemy and committed treason. He was exposed by the other officials in the Ministry of Personnel. Later, that official's entire family was executed. The other officials in the Ministry of Personnel were all promoted and placed in important positions. The officials who died were all promoted during that period. It was obvious that they were retaliated against by the remnants of the guilty officials' party. However, the honored masters of the Department of Offerings have already gone to Yantai County. I believe that the culprit will be arrested very soon. He didn't expect the Ministry of Personnel to have already found out about this. Li Mu didn't need to make this trip. He was about to leave when the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel suddenly smiled and said, "Lord Li, you may not know this, but the Li residence you're living in now is the residence of that guilty official. The day before your wedding is the anniversary of the death of that guilty official's family. I wonder if you heard the screams of their ghosts on your wedding night." Before the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel finished speaking, his expression changed abruptly. A beam of golden light flew out of Li Mu's ear and shot toward him. The golden light was initially the size of a grain of rice, but it quickly turned into a giant bell. It crashed into him like a speeding carriage. White light flashed on the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and instantly formed a shield. However, the protective barrier was like a piece of paper when it was struck by the enormous bell. It was directly shattered. The giant bell didn't slow down and crashed into the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. He crashed heavily into the wall of the Ministry of Personnel and spat out another mouthful of blood. He fell to the ground and pointed at Li Mu. He said furiously, You dare." The law bell floated above Li Mu's shoulder. Li Mu walked to the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and said calmly, "Watch your mouth. If there's a next time, it won't just be a few broken ribs." He took one last look at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and turned to leave. Seeing this, the other officials of the Ministry of Personnel all returned to their duty rooms. They didn't dare to watch. Although beating up an official of the Imperial Court was punishable, the Assistant Minister had brought this upon himself. Anyone who had just gotten married wouldn't be in a good mood after hearing his words. If it were someone else, they might be in trouble. However, Lord Li was His Majesty's favorite official. If the Assistant Minister dared to make a big deal out of this, he would be the one to suffer in the end. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel got up from the ground and fixed his ribs with a solemn expression. He patted the dust off his body and walked out of the Ministry of Personnel. He was just trying to show off. He didn't expect that Li Mu would dare to beat him up in the Ministry of Personnel. Under the Empress' favor, this person was lawless. However, he could only endure today's humiliation for the time being. With how much the Empress doted on Li Mu, it wouldn't do him any good if this matter reached the Imperial Court. He walked out of the Ministry of Personnel and quickly arrived at the Ministry of Justice. In the Assistant Minister's office, Zhou Xian looked at his sorry state and asked, "Lord Chen, what happened?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel didn't speak. Instead he asked, "Are you sure no one from the Li family escaped?" Zhou Xian glanced at him and said, "You should know better than me." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "I just remembered that he has a daughter. She wasn't in the divine capital at the time and couldn't be found. The 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel back then all died in the past half a year. I'm afraid she's the one behind this." Zhou Xian asked, "Are you afraid that she'll come after you for revenge? Aren't you afraid? Don't forget that you stood on our side in the end." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel glanced at him and said, "However, she won't have the chance to come after us. The people from the Department of Worship have already set up an ambush in Yantai County. They should be able to capture her and bring her back to the divine capital soon. When that time comes, don't let her have the chance to say anything. Although this won't cause us much trouble, the higher-ups still don't want to hear any rumors." Zhou Xian nodded and said, "Don't worry, I know." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel looked at him and said, "I'm worried that you'll remember our old friendship. Lord Zhou, you're a smart man. I believe that you'll make the right choice. You should know that we weren't the only ones who wanted him dead back then. Those who make everyone their enemy won't have a good ending." Zhou Xian leaned back in his chair and said, "That's not necessarily the case." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel seemed to have thought of something. His chest where the giant bell hit him started to hurt again. His face immediately darkened and he said, "If it wasn't for the Empress' protection, he would have died 1,000 times over. Just wait and see." No matter who wins in the end between us and the Zhou family, he'll be the first to die. After he dies, the divine capital will remain the same as it was before. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel gloomily said a few more words and left the Ministry of Justice. The door to the assistant minister's office closed. Zhou Xian slowly stood up from his chair. He clenched and unclenched his fists. His expression was conflicted and pained. He seemed to be making a difficult choice in his heart. When his gaze swept across the law of the great Zhou on the table, he stared at the three words for a long time before finally sitting down slowly. I'm sorry. He closed his eyes and muttered softly. Then he curled up his body in the chair. Li Mu left the Ministry of Personnel and returned home. He vented all his anger from Zhou Xian on the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Sure enough, he felt much better. Lu Hanyan had already finished cooking. She asked, "Why did you come back so late today?" Li Mu explained, "I helped the Empress approve some memorials. Then I went to the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Personnel. I was delayed for a while." Lu Hanyan asked in surprise, "Why did you help the Empress approve memorials? That's going against the rules. Won't you be impeached?" Although Li Mu also approved some memorials, the ones that were sent to the Empress were all important matters. Not even the Prime Minister had the right to approve them, let alone a minister from the Secretariat. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. If she doesn't say anything and I don't say anything, no one will know." Lu Hanyan was still confused. She asked, "Why didn't Her Majesty approve them herself?" Li Mu said, "You don't know Her Majesty. She's actually very lazy when it comes to politics. You'll know when you get to know her in the future. But she hasn't been coming to our house recently. Maybe she's afraid of being upset." Lu Hanyan asked, "Upset by what?" Li Mu explained, "Seeing us being so lovey-dovey and thinking about how she's all alone, she's upset." Aha. Mr. May stood at the door of the Li Manor with a box of food in his hand. He snorted loudly. Li Mu's expression changed instantly. He smiled and said, "Sister May, you're just in time. Do you want to sit down and eat together?" Mr. May was here to deliver the box of food. He handed it to Li Mu and glared at him. "No need. I still have things to do in the palace." She was about to leave when Li Mu remembered something. He ran out of the door and said, "Sister May, wait." Mr. May turned around and asked, "What's the matter?" Li Mu asked, "Sister May, do you know who the previous owner of the Li Manor is?" Mr. May was surprised. "Why are you suddenly asking this?" Li Mu said, "I'm just curious." Mr. May looked around and nodded. "I know. It's the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi." Li Mu said, "I heard from the Ministry of Justice that he betrayed the country and his family was exterminated by the imperial court." Mr. May thought for a while and said, "Lord Li is a really good official. He pushed for the reform of the law and proposed to abolish the Silver Act. He tried his best to stop the previous emperor from granting the death exemption. He did a lot of good things for the people." She suddenly looked at Li Mu and said, "Actually, you're very similar to Lord Li. You're in a high position, but what you do is for the people." Li Mu said in surprise, "How could such a person betray the country?" Mr. May shook his head and didn't explain further. Li Mu understood what she meant. What Li Mu and he did affected the interests of the privileged class in Luoyang. Their enemy wasn't one party in the imperial court, but all the parties combined. Without a reliable backer, this kind of reformer usually didn't have a good ending. He was lucky to have met the Empress. Otherwise, his ending wouldn't be much better than Lord Li's. Li Mu had the Empress, but Lord Li didn't. Li Mu asked, "Did the previous emperor just watch this kind of loyal official be persecuted?" Mr. May shook his head. He tried his best to stop the previous emperor from granting the death exemption. The previous emperor was also very dissatisfied with him. The previous emperor tacitly agreed to those people persecuting him. When Li Mu heard this, he was furious and cursed, "This bastard." Mr. May knocked on his head and said, "Mind your status. Is this something you can say?" After that, she touched Li Mu's head and said, "Let's not talk about that bastard. I forgot to tell you that starting tomorrow, you don't have to bring food to Her Majesty anymore." Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I can finally sleep more in the future." Mr. May said, "You can cook in the imperial kitchen from now on." Li Mu was shocked. "What?" Mr. May glanced at him and asked, "What? You don't want to? Did you forget what you said to Her Majesty before?" You're willing to go through fire and water for her. Now you don't want to cook a few dishes for her? Were you lying to Her Majesty before? Li Mu looked at Mr. Mei blankly. Mr. Mei stared at him and asked, "Why are you looking at me?" Li Mu murmured, "Why do you speak so much like Her Majesty? As a friend, I have to remind you that Her Majesty is different from you. At your age, you should be down to earth, considerate and sensible. If you still play the little girl game, you might not be able to get married in this lifetime." Mr. Mei asked, "What's different about Her Majesty?" Li Mu looked around and whispered, "You still have a chance to get married, but Her Majesty doesn't. Even if she wants to marry, no one dares to marry her. It's more likely that she marries someone else." For Mr. Mei, Li Mu felt like a younger brother who had a family and saw that no one wanted his older sister. She wasn't in a hurry and Li Mu was worried for her too. He had to let her know her place. Her age was comparable to two 18-year-old girls. If she couldn't recognize herself, she might still be alone when she was 80. For this reason, Li Mu even criticized the Empress behind her back again. However, he trusted Mr. Mei a lot. At most, she would give Li Mu a slap on the head, but she wouldn't complain to the Empress. Li Mu's trust in Mr. Mei completely collapsed when he slept next to Lu Hanyan at night and saw the Empress waiting for him with a whip in her dream. Chapter 356. In front of the Secretariat. Li Mu looked at Mr. Mei with resentful eyes, recalling the beating in his dream last night and said, "You betrayed my trust." Mr. Mei's lips moved as if he wanted to explain, but she couldn't tell Li Mu that Her Majesty had disguised herself as her and visited the Li mansion incognito. She coughed softly and said, "I didn't tell Her Majesty, but in Shindu, you can't hide it from her if you criticize Her Majesty behind her back." As Li Mu's cultivation improved and his knowledge widened, the mysterious veil of the masters of the upper realm had long been removed in his eyes. The Empress's cultivation was high, but it wasn't so high that she could know everything in the world just by sitting in the Changle Palace. She could even hear Li Mu complaining about her. Now he began to wonder if the Empress had installed some kind of eavesdropping magic weapon on him. Or maybe when he was persuading Mr. Mei yesterday she used the dark light technique to spy on him, but he had a jade talisman that could shield the secrets of heaven, so the dark light technique couldn't spy on him. Could it be that the Empress blocked others and only gave herself permission? Just in case, Li Mu put the jade talisman that he carried with him into the teapot space. Most of the time he didn't care if the Empress spied on him, but today was different from the past. He still had some inconveniences every day. As for the thing that could shield the secrets of heaven, he could use Fulu instead. The secrets of heaven were hard to predict, but shielding them was easy. He had the lifetime experience of Talisman Daozi and the inheritance of the Daoist page, so it wasn't difficult to draw a Fulu to replace the shielding jade talisman. After parting with Mr. Mei, Li Mu walked into the Secretariat. These days, Li Mu had dealt with all the memorials that he needed to deal with in time. Today he was only busy for more than 15 minutes and had nothing to do. Since he had nothing to do, he picked up a pen and wrote a name on a paper. Li Yi. This official with the same surname as him used to be a clear stream in the imperial court, but his ending was extremely regrettable. More than 10 years ago, for the sake of the people of Great Zhou, he made an enemy of the nobles of the imperial court. More than 10 years later, Li Mu was living in his old house, doing things that he had never finished. It seemed that fate existed in the unseen world. The 4 dead managers of the Ministry of Personnel were probably one of the people who had framed him back then. The real culprit behind their deaths was very likely a friend of Lord Li's. Li Mu felt a little regretful. Revenge was indeed satisfying, but the majesty of the law was not to be challenged. The 4 of them had broken the law and should be tried by the imperial court. He had killed many officials of the imperial court for personal gain. The circumstances were extremely bad. No matter what the reason was, he would not be able to escape death. At this point, Li Mu could not save him, but he wanted to do something for him, for the hero who had died in vain. Not for anything else, but for the fate of a house. He left the Secretariat and returned to the Ministry of Justice. As soon as the director of the Ministry of Justice saw him, he came out of the yamen and asked, "Does official Li have any orders?" Li Mu said, "I want to investigate a case." The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "Which case does official Li want to investigate? I will send someone to find it for you." Li Mu said, 14 years ago the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi, committed treason. The director of the Ministry of Justice trembled when he heard this. and his face immediately turned pale. Li Mu saw the change in his expression and asked, "Why, is there a problem?" The director of the Ministry of Justice pulled Li Mu into his yamen, and only then did he dare to take a breath and persuade Li Mu, "Officially, this time you must listen to my advice. This case cannot be touched, really cannot be touched." Li Mu asked, "Why not?" The director of the Ministry of Justice shook his head and said, "This case involves too many people. Moreover, it has been decided for more than 10 years. Officially, why do you want to cause more trouble?" Li Mu looked at the director of the Ministry of Justice. When he wanted to investigate the academy, he thought that the director of the Ministry of Justice had not been so afraid. It seemed that this case was indeed unusual. Li Mu said, "You just need to bring the file over." The director of the Ministry of Justice still looked hesitant. "This." Zhou Xian walked in and said, "Since officially wants it, then give it to him." The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at Zhou Xian and finally nodded, saying, "Yes." Zhou Xian looked at Li Mu and asked, "This case has been over for more than 10 years. Why do you suddenly want to investigate it?" Li Mu looked directly at Zhou Xian and asked in return, "Why don't you investigate it?" The former owner of the Li mansion was Zhou Xian's friend. He had more reason than Li Mu to commit a crime for his friend. Zhou Xian did not answer directly. His eyes stopped on Li Mu and said, "You are really very similar. Even the houses you live in are the same. I don't know if this is a sign from the heavens." Li Mu said, "You haven't answered my question." Zhou Xian looked at Li Mu and said, "Don't bring up this case again. I'm doing this for your own good. You've done what many of us can't. Don't let the results of your previous efforts go down the drain." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Next time if you dare to speak rudely in front of the Li mansion, don't blame me for being ruthless." Considering that the former owner of the Li mansion was Zhou Xian's old friend, Li Mu could forgive him for remembering his old friend on the day before Li Mu's wedding. After today, this reason would no longer exist. The director of the Ministry of Justice had already brought over a thick dossier. After Li Mu opened it, he skipped over the series of evidence at the front. In a battle in the imperial court, if one wanted to pin a crime on a person, it didn't depend on what he did but where he stood. If you stood on the right side, then what was wrong was also right. If you stood on the wrong side, then what was right was also wrong. He directly flipped to the testimony section and saw a series of names. The Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel Xiao Yuan, the Director of the Ministry of Personnel Chen Jian, the Director of the Ministry of Personnel Gao Hong, the Vice-Chancellor of the Supreme Court Zhou Chuan, the Marquis of Zhongyong Lu Kuan, the Count of Ping and Yao Bin. 14 years ago, it was these people who convicted Li Yi of treason, causing his family to be exterminated. These were the official positions of these people 14 years ago. Li Mu was familiar with most of these names. The Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel Xiao Yuan was now the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He was a member of the Xiao royal family. The Director of the Ministry of Personnel Chen Jian was now the Left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The Director of the Ministry of Personnel Gao Hong was now the Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The Vice-Chancellor of the Supreme Court Zhou Chuan was the younger brother of Minister Zhou Jing, the Empress's third uncle and the current Minister of Works. Most of these people after their names were the nobles of Luoyang. They were also the people whose fundamental interests had been affected by Li Yi's reform. 14 years later, most of them had become important figures in the imperial court. Among them, there were nobles, pillars of the new party and members of the old party. Li Mu finally knew why the director of the Ministry of Justice had stopped him. Previously, he had only been messing around with the younger generation of these forces. This time, if he wanted to reverse the verdict for Li Yi, he would have to face the elders of these people. 14 years had passed, and they had already occupied important positions in the imperial court. It was not easy to touch even one of them, let alone all of them. It was tantamount to uprooting both the new party and the old party from the imperial court. Not to mention whether anyone could do it, even if they could, the imperial court of the Great Zhou would be riddled with holes. It would be a perfect opportunity for foreign enemies to take advantage of. Zhou Xian looked at Li Mu and asked, "Do you still want to investigate?" Li Mu was no longer the hothead he was when he first entered Luoyang. This was also not a small fight between him and the hedonistic son of a wealthy family. To clear Li Yi's name, it meant that he had to completely clean up the Ministry of Personnel. One minister, two assistant ministers, Zhou Xian of the Zhou family and the empress's third uncle as the mastermind of this case, it was inevitable that they would be sentenced to death. As for the large number of officials involved, although their crimes did not warrant death, many of them would be stripped of their positions and banished from the army. The current Great Zhou court could not accept such turmoil. Zhou Zhong's gaze was still fixed on Li Mu. He said slowly, "Go back. If you still want to do something for the people in the future, you have to know how to protect yourself. Only by protecting yourself will there be hope." Walking out of the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu's mood was unprecedentedly low. There were some things that even if he knew what was right, he could not ignore the consequences. He had to think for the Empress and also for the Great Zhou. Thinking carefully about what Zhou Zhong said before he left, Li Mu seemed to understand why Zhou Zhong's name was on the list he saw just now. Protecting himself and leaving behind hope was probably the choice he made at that time. At the same time, Li Mu also knew why the culprit of these 4 cases would choose to take revenge in such a way. Although the law could give him justice, the imperial court could not. Therefore he chose to seek justice for himself. Most of the time, Li Mu hoped that anyone who broke the law would be punished. Only this time he hoped that the culprit could escape. It would be best if after the deaths of the 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel, he had already given up on revenge and did not go to Yantai County anymore. Yantai County. The Yantai County commandant stood in the courtyard and looked at the figure that appeared in the courtyard. He said mockingly, "I didn't expect you to really dare to come." As soon as he finished speaking, 4 powerful auras appeared in the 4 corners of the courtyard. They enveloped the entire courtyard with a formation and no one could enter or leave. The Yantai County commandant looked at the woman wearing the bamboo hat and sneered. "You are only at the 4th realm. Who gave you the confidence to assassinate me?" Under the bamboo hat, the woman's lips moved slightly and she seemed to say a word. A dark purple thunderbolt ignored the isolation of the formation and condensed directly above the Yantai County commandant's head. The Yantai County commandant did not even have time to react before he was reduced to ashes by the thunderbolt. A few of the imperial court's consecrators stood dumbfounded on the spot. This person actually killed the Yantai County commandant right in front of them. The Yantai County commandant's cultivation was at the peak of the 4th realm, much higher than that woman. However, she was only at the 4th realm. How could she know the purple heavenly thunder that could only be used at the 5th realm? Moreover, the power of the purple heavenly thunder was close to that of the mid-5th realm. After the woman killed the Yantai County commandant, she took off her bamboo hat and stood quietly on the spot, as if she did not intend to resist. One of the consecrators frowned. "She wants to die?" They had set up an ambush here, but she still killed the Yantai County commandant right in front of them. Another consecrator flew into a rage out of humiliation. He formed a hand seal and gritted his teeth. "If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." So, a consecrator beside him stopped him and said, "Our duty is only to capture her. Don't do anything unnecessary. Bring her back to the divine capital, and the imperial court will deal with her." The woman looked at them and said, "I won't go back to the divine capital with you. Kill me now." One of the consecrators looked at her coldly and said, "That's not up to you. With the crimes you've committed, it would be too easy for you to die just like that." Clang. A shiny sword appeared in the woman's hand, and she stabbed it at the consecrator. The consecrator easily caught the sword with 2 fingers and sneered. "You want to anger me and make me kill you? Dream on. I don't want to kill you now. You don't want to go to the divine capital, so I'll bring you back to the divine capital." As soon as he finished speaking, the other consecrators spoke as well. "If she dies, we won't be able to report back. Let's attack together. Seal her spiritual power first. Don't give her a chance to kill herself." The divine capital. A day ago, Li Mu asked for half a month's leave from the Empress. Firstly, he wanted to spend time with Lu Hanyan. Secondly, he wanted to adjust his mood. Regarding Li Yi's matter, Li Mu wanted to but was powerless to do so. This made him feel very apologetic. The house that he used to live in was not so comfortable these days. In order to make him feel better, he spread some news about the case. The citizens of the divine capital were initially filled with righteous indignation about the deaths of the 4 court officials. This was a provocation to the imperial court and trampling on the dignity of the Great Zhou's law. However, after learning the truth, the public opinion changed overnight. So he's avenging Lord Li. Lord Li is such a good person. Those people deserve to die. I hope he doesn't get caught. He might be Lord Li's only descendant. It was also at this time that Li Mu realized that the citizens of the divine capital had never forgotten about Li Yi. Even though more than a decade had passed, some of the older citizens still remembered his deeds when he was mentioned. The younger ones were still young and did not know about Li Yi. However, after hearing the stories of the elders, the flames of justice were ignited in their hearts. Lord Li was persecuted by those people back then for the sake of the citizens. Sigh, it's a pity that Lord Li was not born in the imperial court. If only he could join forces with Lord Li Jr., how good would that be? What a pity. Walking hand in hand with Lu Hanyan on the streets, Li Mu could occasionally hear the citizens discussing the events of the past. He finally felt a little better, even though he had already been called Lord Li Jr. by the citizens. Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's hand and said with some regret, I remember that Lord Li's incident happened exactly a year after I was sold to the music workshop. Lord Li's entire family was wrongly murdered. The workshop owner was so angry that he didn't open the shop for 3 days and didn't allow us to play. There was a younger sister who, because she didn't need to practice the zither, laughed happily and was punished by the workshop owner to stand for an entire day. It was also at that time that I heard about Lord Li from the workshop owner. Who would have thought that the house we're living in now was the house he used to live in? Li Mu sighed and said, the day before our wedding was the anniversary of his death. Lu Hanyan said with some regret, if we had known we would have pushed it back a few days. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, when the time is right I want to reverse the verdict for him. Lu Hanyan tightly gripped his hand and said, no matter what decision you make I'll be with you. With her at his side, Li Mu's mood improved greatly. He accompanied her to visit a few more shops. Just as the two of them were preparing to return home, there was a sudden commotion on the streets. Many citizens rushed forward. Li Mu walked onto the street and stopped a person. What's going on? He asked. That person saw that it was Li Mu and sighed. It's Lord Li. I heard that a few days ago the murderer of those officials was caught. How did she get caught? Those who should be caught aren't caught, but those who shouldn't be caught are randomly caught. The people he killed were all people who deserved to die. The imperial court didn't distinguish between right and wrong. The common people's thoughts were often very simple. They did not understand the law and most of them would only judge a matter based on the morals in their hearts. Their thoughts were often not in line with the law, but they were in line with the most simple understanding of things as an ordinary person. Lu Hanyan walked out and held Li Mu's hand. Can you think of a way to save him? She asked. Li Mu shook his head and said, it's very difficult. Xiao Yu killed the county magistrate of Yang County because the county magistrate of Yang County killed her. Moreover, she was recognized by the heavens. Even so, the imperial court dared to go against the heavens at the beginning. If the empress hadn't intervened, she wouldn't have been able to escape the fate of having her soul scattered. This case was fundamentally different from Xiao Yu's case. The law didn't encourage revenge. Even the victims could only fight back when their lives were threatened. Revenge after the fact would still be punished by the law. Moreover, he killed 4 officials. The circumstances were extremely bad. There was almost no possibility of being forgiven. A few citizens walked over from afar and spoke with regret. She was still caught. I heard that she's Sir Li's daughter. No wonder she wanted to take revenge for Sir Li. Could it be that Sir Li's last bloodline is going to be cut off? A prisoner's carriage slowly drove over from the front of the street. Parading through the streets was an additional punishment given by the imperial court to those who committed the most heinous crimes. This was a humiliation to them and also a deterrent to those who had bad intentions. Usually when criminals were paraded through the streets, the citizens would rush up and throw rotten eggs, rotten vegetables and other things at them. This was also tacitly allowed by the imperial court. However, today the streets were exceptionally quiet wherever the prisoner's carriage passed. The citizens silently stood on both sides of the street. They didn't say a word as they watched the prisoner's carriage pass. When they looked at the figure on the prisoner's carriage, there was no disgust or hatred in their eyes. There was only pity and anger towards the imperial court. A citizen who didn't know what was going on saw the prisoner's carriage pass by. He quickly ran home and took out a rotten egg that he always kept at home. Just as he was about to throw it, he was seen by a sharp-eyed man. He kicked him to the ground and asked with red eyes, "What the F*** are you doing?" The person who was pressed to the ground had a puzzled expression. I'm going to throw a rotten egg. Why aren't you prepared at all? The man said angrily. That's Sir Li's child. I told you to throw it, I told you to throw it. If you don't eat this egg today, I'll beat you to death. Just as the person was about to resist, the rotten egg in his hand was snatched and stuffed into his mouth. Ugh! An unbearable stench filled his mouth and nose. His eyes rolled back and he directly fainted. The prisoner's carriage slowly drove down the street. Beside the prisoner's carriage, two priests from the Department of Priests looked at each other and felt a chill in their hearts. Strange, it was too strange. Usually when the prisoner's carriage passed by, the streets would be in chaos. What was going on today? Why was it so quiet? The two Fifth Realm powerhouses actually couldn't stand the way the commoners looked at them. Li Mu looked at the prisoner's carriage slowly driving down. He originally couldn't bear to look at it, but when his gaze swept over the figure in the prisoner's carriage, everything that he looked at, whether it was the prisoner's carriage, the streets, the shops beside the streets, or the citizens on the streets, everything disappeared. There was only that figure left in his eyes. Looking at the extremely pale and frail figure standing in the prisoner's carriage, Li Mu felt as if someone had grabbed his heart, making it hard for him to breathe. How could it be? How could it be? At this moment, countless thoughts intertwined in his mind. One mystery after another was solved just like that. Li Qing. Li Qing was Li Yi's daughter. Why did she cultivate so hard? Why did she leave Fulu school? Why did she look hesitant and conflicted when she parted ways with Li Mu? Why did she hesitate to speak? These were things that Li Mu couldn't figure out in the past. At this moment he had an answer. In the prisoner's carriage, Li Qing, whose eyes were originally closed, suddenly felt something. She slowly opened her eyes and looked in a direction. The moment their gazes met, her body trembled. A hint of panic flashed across her face. She turned her face away as much as she could to prevent Li Mu from seeing her. Lu Hanyan looked at the figure in the prisoner's carriage in shock. She instinctively let go of Li Mu's hand. In the next moment, Li Mu grabbed her hand again. She turned to look at Li Mu. Her heart instantly calmed down. She gripped Li Mu's hand tightly and then slowly let go. She looked at Li Mu and said softly, "Go." Li Mu nodded. He looked at her and said, "Wait for me at home." After the prisoner's carriage entered the divine capital, it passed through a few streets and slowly drove to the entrance of the Ministry of Justice. The culprit who had assassinated 5 officials of the imperial court would be temporarily detained in the Ministry of Justice to await trial by the imperial court. Based on her vile actions, she would be sentenced to death if nothing went wrong. A moment later, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xian walked into the prison and said to a few people, "You guys go out first." All the prison guards had temporarily left. Zhou Xian was the only one in front of the prison cell in the deepest part of the Ministry of Justice. Zhou Xian stood at the door of the prison cell and looked at the woman in the cell. His tone was extremely complicated. He said slowly, "Why didn't you listen to me? Do you know that this is a capital offense? Even I can't save you." Li Qing looked at him and asked, "If I listened to you, would I be able to clear my father's name? Would I be able to avenge my father, mother, and the entire Li family?" Zhou Xian shook his head and said, "You don't understand your father. He doesn't want you to avenge him. He only wants you to live well. I promised him that I would protect his bloodline. I also promised him that I would complete his unfinished business. He views this matter as more important than his life." He was silent for a long time. With his back facing Li Qing, he leaned weakly against the bars of the prison cell and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry." A smile appeared on Li Qing's face as she said, "You didn't let anyone down. You have done enough for me." Zhou Xian's lips moved. Just as he was about to speak, a furious voice suddenly came from outside the prison. "Zhou, what are you doing in there alone? Come out. I'll count to 3. If you don't come out, I'll smash the door. 1. Lord Li, calm down, calm down." Chapter 357. Li Mu counted 1, and the law bell grew louder as if it was about to strike. The door of the prison opened from the inside and Zhou Xian walked out. He said in a low voice, "What do you want?" Li Mu said coldly, "You sent all the jailers away and stayed in there alone. I want to ask you, what do you want?" Zhou Xian regained his composure and said lightly, "I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Can't I ask about the case?" Why do I have to send everyone away if I want to ask about the case? This is an important case. All unrelated people should leave. Is there a problem? You. Li Mu pointed at Zhou Xian. He seemed to have thought of something and a light flashed in his mind. He said with a look of understanding, "It's you." Zhou Xian asked calmly, "What do you mean, Lord Li?" Li Mu looked at him and asked, "You are Li heir, right?" Zhou Xian's eyes flashed with a trace of shock. He said calmly, "I don't know what Lord Li is talking about." Li Mu didn't know who Li heir was before. After knowing that Li Qing was Li Yi's daughter, he didn't need to guess who Li heir was. Zhou Xian was Li heir. Zhou Xian was the one who won the Talisman Dao trial and sent Li Qing to the Fulu school. No wonder Li Mu had never seen the heaven-grade Fulu on his desk. Zhou Xian himself was a rare Talisman Dao genius, but he never showed it. In this case, the Ministry of Justice didn't investigate the deaths of the Anyang County Magistrate and the Tianhe County Deputy because Zhou Xian didn't forget about them. At that time he knew that these two cases were done by Li Qing and deliberately suppressed them. The mysteries in Li Mu's heart were solved one by one. However, Zhou Xian's heart was filled with confusion. Why did Li Mu come here? How did he know about his other identity? What was the relationship between him and Li Qing? Li Mu was so anxious that he didn't want to waste time talking nonsense with Zhou Xian. He said, "Let me in." Zhou Xian was still puzzled. He stood in front of Li Mu and shook his head. "She is a wanted criminal of the imperial court," he said. "Visiting the prison is forbidden." Li Mu's face darkened as he said, "Get out of the way or I won't be polite." Zhou Xian's expression was calm as he asked, "How impolite are you, Lord Li?" Li Mu looked at Zhou Xian and said, "You forced me to do this." He took out the spirit conch and sent a voice transmission. "Your Majesty." A moment later, Li Mu handed the spirit snail to Zhou Xian. After Zhou Xian took it, he heard the voice coming from the spirit conch. He said respectfully to the spirit conch, "Yes, I understand. I will do as you command." He returned the spirit snail to Li Mu and quietly stepped aside. Li Mu walked into the prison. Zhou Xian was about to follow him in when Li Mu turned around and said, "Close the door. Don't let anyone in, including you." Zhou Xian frowned and was about to speak when Li Mu took out the spirit conch again and asked, "Do you want His Majesty to talk to you directly?" Zhou Xian didn't speak again. He closed the door and slowly walked to the assistant minister's office. He looked up and saw the door of the assistant minister's office was closed. Inside the assistant minister's office, Zhou Xian extended his hand and flicked out a ray of white light. An image appeared in the air. It was the scene in the prison of the Ministry of Justice. However, as soon as the image appeared, it blurred and nothing could be seen. The heavenly mystery has been blocked. Zhou Xian's face showed a hint of impatience. He anxiously paced around the office. At the same time, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu had already walked to the deepest part of the prison. The aura he was so familiar with was in the cell around the corner. Li Mu was only one step away from her. It had been a very, very long time since he had been so close to her. Li Mu stood around the corner for a while before slowly taking that step. In the cell, Li Qing bent her knees and leaned against the wall. She raised her head and looked at the door of the cell. A faint smile appeared on her lips and she said, "I thought I wouldn't have the chance to personally congratulate you." Li Mu looked at her and asked, "You already know?" Li Qing hugged her knees and said, "The fireworks that night were very beautiful." Li Mu thought of the inexplicable throbbing in his heart that day. He said, "Sorry, I didn't know the Li estate was your previous home." If he knew the Li estate was her previous home and that the day before their wedding was the anniversary of her family's death, Li Mu would have asked the Empress for a new estate and chosen a new date to hold the wedding. He simply couldn't imagine how Li Qing felt that night. Li Qing shook her head and said, "It doesn't matter. I heard from the people of Luoyang that you did a lot of good things for the people. I'm very happy that you can live in the Li estate. Father knew he would be happy too." Li Mu took out a piece of fulu and walked through the cell door. He sat down next to Li Qing. Li Qing tilted her head and looked at him. "Promise me one thing." Li Mu said decisively, "No." Li Qing said, "I'm your boss." Li Mu said, "You used to be. Don't meddle in my business." "I'm not meddling in your business. I'm just doing what I should do. Sir Li is devoted to the people. I admire him, respect him and see him as my role model. What's wrong with me trying to redress the injustice for my role model?" Li Mu looked at her pale face and said, "Open your mouth." Li Qing turned her head and said, "Leave. Don't come back." Li Mu pinched her chin and put a pill into her mouth. Her mana was sealed. Li Mu couldn't undo the seal for the time being. He could only use the pill bestowed by the Empress to heal her. Li Qing's lips moved. Li Mu said first, "You know me. Once I've decided on something, no one can change it. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came, I would still meddle in this matter." Li Qing turned her head. There was a trace of sobbing in her voice. "Who am I to you? What right do you have to meddle in my affairs? You are my boss." Li Mu looked at her and said, "Before it was you who protected me. Now it is my turn to protect you." Li Qing grabbed Li Mu's hand tightly. "You can't win against them. Father can't win against them. You can't win against them either. Plus I can't turn back anymore." Li Mu held her hand and said, "Trust me. I will think of a way to get you out first." Li Qing shook her head and said, "You have already made many enemies in the divine capital. This will become evidence and evidence for them to attack you." Li Mu said, "I will have the Fulu school step in." Li Qing said sadly, "I am no longer a disciple of the Fulu school." Li Mu extended his hand. There was a flash of white light in his palm. A talisman appeared in his hand. He placed the talisman in Li Qing's hand and said, "Now you are again." Li Qing held the talisman and looked at him. Li Mu smiled and said, "I won it in passing when I participated in the Talisman Dao trial. I thought you would need it in the future. I just didn't expect it to be so soon. Sir Li, it's time." Zhou Xian's voice came from outside. Li Mu stood up and took a deep breath. He looked at Li Qing and said, "Recover well. Don't worry about anything else. I will take care of everything." He walked out of the cell and looked deeply at Li Qing. Then he strode out of the prison. Zhou Xian stood outside the prison. He looked at Li Mu and asked, "You know her?" Li Mu did not answer. He said, "What do you plan to do?" Zhou Xian was silent for a moment and said, "Assassinate 5 court officials. According to the law. Don't King talk to me about the law. Is there any law in the divine capital?" Li Mu had nowhere to vent his anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "If the nobles break the law, they will pay with their gold medallions. If the officials die unjustly, they will have no way to redress their grievances. Tell me, what is the law? What is King law?" Zhou Xian said in a low voice, "Don't forget that you are an official of the great show. Don't break the law. Don't forget how many people are waiting for you to make a mistake. If you take a wrong step, you will lose everything you have." Li Mu looked at him and said calmly, "I don't care." Zhou Xian met his gaze and asked, "What do you care?" Li Mu did not answer. A figure strode in from the entrance of the Ministry of Justice. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel had just stepped into the Ministry of Justice when he asked Zhou Xian, "Sir Zhou, where is the Li family's remaining member?" When he reached the courtyard of the Ministry of Justice, he realized that the atmosphere was not right. He stopped in his tracks. He looked to the side of Zhou Xian and met a pair of blood-red eyes. Li Mu looked at the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, one of the masterminds who framed Li Qing's father. He finally found an outlet to vent his anger. With a thought, a Fulu appeared out of thin air. A faint light flashed on the Fulu, and the runes merged into Li Mu's body. A layer of golden armor appeared on his body. Even his fists were covered in golden light. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel realized that something was wrong. His expression changed as he shouted, "Li Mu, what are you doing?" Li Mu's entire body was covered in armor. He gritted his teeth and said, "Qin, I've tolerated you for a long time." As soon as he finished speaking, his body turned into a blur as he flew toward the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel hurriedly blocked and said in anger, "Li Mu, are you crazy?" "I am crazy, but it's all your fault. The humiliation you gave me that day caused me to develop an inner demon. What enmity do you have with me? How dare you frame me like this? I can't take this lying down. Today I'll pay you back double for the humiliation you gave me that day." The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was shocked. He did not expect that his mocking words that day would cause Li Mu to develop an inner demon. This made him angry but also pleased. It would be best if the inner demon took over his mind and turned him into a lunatic. His Majesty would not dote on a lunatic. The only outcome of having one's mind taken over by the inner demon was death. However, this trace of happiness in his heart quickly disappeared without a trace. He did not know what Fulu Limu had used, but the combat power he displayed was not weaker than a creation realm cultivator. In close combat, the left assistant minister could only passively defend. He did not even have the chance to use any spells. After taking a few punches, he looked at Zhou Xian and shouted, "Lord Zhou, what are you waiting for?" Zhou Xian shouted back, "Lord Qin, I'm coming to help you now." With that, he flew up but was kicked away by Li Mu. His body flew into a yamen and did not appear again. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel knew that Zhou Xian was no match for Li Mu, so he fled out of the Ministry of Justice in a panic. He did not believe that Li Mu would dare to attack him in front of so many people in the divine capital. After the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhou Xian walked out of a yamen. He patted the dust off his body and walked back into the Ministry of Justice's prison. In the cell, Li Qing stood up and looked at him. She asked, "What happened outside?" Zhou Xian said, "It's nothing. Li Mu and Xianxia are fighting." Li Qing said anxiously, "Go and stop him, don't worry. As long as he doesn't kill Xianxia will be the unlucky one in the end." Zhou Xian looked at Li Qing, who was still nervous, and said, "Although he often did some crazy things in the past, he was still rational. For you, he even lost his rationality. Now, can you tell me what's the relationship between you two?" Chapter 358. Outside the Ministry of Justice, on the streets of Divine Capital. "You're crazy. You're really crazy. Li Mu, do you know the consequences of your actions?" "Li, I won't let you get away with this." The Assistant Minister of Personnel's expression changed from shock to fear. He did not expect Li Mu to attack him on the streets in front of the citizens of Divine Capital. Is this lunatic not afraid of the Imperial Court's punishment? The citizens on the streets were also dumbfounded by what they saw. Who else could it be other than young Master Li, whose entire body was shining with golden light and was currently chasing after someone? Upon closer inspection, the person being beaten was wearing a high-ranked official's uniform. He seemed to be the Assistant Minister of Personnel. The commoners did not know much about the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. They only knew that he held a high position and was an important figure in the old party. Over the past few days, after the inside story of Lord Li's case was uncovered, they found out that this person was the mastermind who framed Lord Li. With that merit, he had risen to the top and was now sitting in Lord Li's position. It was absolutely detestable. Seeing Li Mu chasing after him and beating him up, the citizens felt an indescribable satisfaction. Well done. This kind of person will only cause trouble if we let him live. Let's just beat him to death. Sai, if we beat him to death, Li Mu will also get into big trouble. It's better to beat him up to vent our anger. Why is Li Mu so impulsive today? Is he also speaking up for Li Mu? The citizens did not dare to speak loudly. They could only whisper. Above their heads, waves of dermic powers quickly attracted a few figures. "Stop. How dare you fight here? Stop it." A few generals in silver armor quickly flew over. They were about to stop the fight when they were surprised to find that it was the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and Li Mu from the Secretariat who were fighting in the sky above Luoyang. They did not know how to deal with it. If two cultivators dared to fight in Divine Capital, they would have been taken down long ago. But what was the reason for these two important officials to fight in front of so many people? Li Mu, the Secretary of the Secretariat, was still in good condition. Only his hair was a little messy, but Qin Jian, the left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, had a bloody nose and a swollen face. Seeing the Imperial Guard generals who guarded Divine Capital arrive, Li Mu did not make things difficult for them. He stopped and quietly floated in the air. The Assistant Minister of Personnel covered his bruised eyes. He was furious. "What are you waiting for? Take him down." The Imperial Guard could not deal with the officials fighting. One general looked at the two officials and said, "Sirs, please follow us to His Majesty's side." Hearing the words His Majesty, the Assistant Minister of Personnel's heart skipped a beat. After weighing the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth and said, "Forget it. His Majesty is busy every day. Let's not disturb him over such a small matter." I have some misunderstanding with Li Mu. The Assistant Minister of Personnel was obviously the victim. He did not want to pursue the matter. The generals did not want to wait too long. Just as they were about to leave, Li Mu's face darkened. He said coldly, "It's a misunderstanding. Qinjian, you cut off my path of cultivation and you want to let it go? Come, follow me to His Majesty." Seeing that Li Mu was not going to let it go, the Imperial Guard generals were troubled. The leader weighed the pros and cons and said, "Sirs, let's go." Although they did not want to be a busybody, they had to deal with this matter as long as one person did not relent. Otherwise they would be derelict in their duties. What they could not understand was that the Assistant Minister of Personnel had already decided to let it go, but the culprit was not going to let it go. In Xianxia Palace, Zhou Yi was listening to the officials of the 3 provinces report on the state affairs. Mr. Mei walked in from outside and said with a strange expression, "Your Majesty, Qin Jian, the Assistant Minister of Personnel, and Li Mu from the Secretariat request an audience." Zhou Yi said, "Let them in." Soon 2 figures walked in from outside. The first to walk in was Qin Jian, the Assistant Minister of Personnel. His clothes were messy, his official robe was untidy, his official hat was askew, and his face was covered in bruises. The officials were shocked. How did the Assistant Minister of Personnel, a master of the creation realm, end up like this? Qin Jian walked into the hall and said with grief and indignation, "Your Majesty." Li Mu walked past Qin Jian and walked in quickly. He said with grievance, "Your Majesty, you have to uphold justice for me." The Assistant Minister of Personnel was stunned. He stared blankly at Li Mu. He opened his mouth but did not say anything. He had been an official for many years, but he had never seen such a shameless person. In front of His Majesty, he dared to complain first. Without waiting for Li Mu to speak again, he immediately said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu from the Secretariat has disregarded the law and beat up an important official of the Imperial Court. Your Majesty, please punish him severely and uphold the law." In the hall, the officials of the 3 provinces finally knew that the Assistant Minister of Personnel was injured by Li Mu. Looking at Li Mu's appearance just now, they thought that the Assistant Minister of Personnel had done something to Li Mu. Bao Yi looked at Li Mu and asked, "What the Assistant Minister of Personnel said, is it true?" Li Mu said, "Your Majesty, I have a reason for my actions. Please investigate it." Zhou Yi said, "No reason can be a reason for you to beat up an important official of the Imperial Court." Li Mu raised his head and said, "On the 10th day of the 10th month, the left Assistant Minister of Personnel Qin Jian verbally humiliated me in the Ministry of Personnel, causing me to develop an inner demon. Your Majesty, please show me the scene from that day." Zhou Yi waved his hand and sent out a ray of white light. An image appeared above the heads of everyone in the hall. In the image, Li Mu was about to leave the Ministry of Personnel when the Assistant Minister of Personnel suddenly said, "Lord Li, you may not know this, but the Li residence you are living in now is the residence of that guilty official. The day before your wedding is the anniversary of the death of that guilty official's family. I wonder if you heard the wails of their ghosts on your wedding night." Seeing this scene, the Assistant Minister of Personnel's face paled. The officials in the hall finally understood why the Assistant Minister of Personnel had met such an end. Even if it was an ordinary person's wedding, there would still be some good luck. It was very taboo for people to say anything inauspicious. Who could tolerate such verbal humiliation on the day of someone's wedding? Moreover, this kind of humiliation had caused the person involved to develop an inner demon. In the cultivation world, this was probably not something that could be settled with a simple beating. Ruining the path of cultivation was a great enmity that would not rest until one of them was dead. Zhou Yi looked at the Assistant Minister of Personnel and asked, "Do you have anything else to say?" The Assistant Minister of Personnel hurriedly explained, "Your Majesty, I was muddle-headed at that time." Zhou Yi said coldly, "Being muddle-headed is not an excuse for ruining the Dao hearts of your colleagues." The Assistant Minister of Personnel hurriedly knelt and said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, please forgive me." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "Assistant Minister of Personnel Qin Jian humiliated a colleague. The consequences are serious. His moral conduct is lacking. He will be suspended from his duties for a month and his salary will be deducted for half a year." The ministers in the hall glanced at the Assistant Minister of Personnel and sighed in their hearts. Qin Jian really had no foresight. Li Mu was the favored minister of the Empress. Qin Jian dared to drag Li Mu to meet the Empress when he knew that he was in the wrong. Wasn't he walking right into a trap? The officials of the 3 provinces still had to report to the political leaders. After the Empress concluded the case of Li Mu and Qin Jian, the 2 of them walked out of Xianxia Palace. Today's humiliation will be avenged in the future. Qin Jian took one last look at Li Mu, covered his face with his sleeves and left in a hurry. Li Mu walked slowly in the palace, but his thoughts were running fast. He and Li Yi shared the same residence. According to his original plan, he would take the long view and plan step by step. When the time was right, he would overturn the case for Li Yi and clear his name. This way he could minimize the impact on the situation in the imperial court and would not cause too much trouble for the empress. As for the person who caused these cases, he could only try his best to save his life. Even if he did not succeed in the end, he had already done what he should have done. Regarding this matter, he did not ask for anything other than peace of mind. This was the most rational thing to do. However, when he saw the figure in the prisoner carriage, he threw all rationality and plans to the back of his mind. The first thing he needed to do now was to get Li Qing out of the Ministry of Justice. Although Zhou Xian was in the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xian happened to be the person Li Mu did not trust the most. Li Mu knew very well that Zhou Xian had actually given up on her just now. In Zhou Xian's heart, there was something that he thought was more noble. After thinking for a while, the only person Li Mu could trust at the moment was Zhang Chun. The power of the Zhongjing Temple had been further expanded recently. The cases that the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court could handle were handled by the Zhongjing Temple. The cases that the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court could not handle were handled by the Zhongjing Temple. Li Mu first returned to the Secretariat and drafted an official document with the identity of the Secretariat's secretary. After that, he asked Mr. Mei to ask the Empress to temporarily interrupt the debriefing of the officials of the 3 provinces and put the Empress's seal on the document. After that, he went to the Zhongjing Temple and handed the document to Zhang Chun, asking him to transfer Li Qing from the Ministry of Justice to the Zhongjing Temple. Although the Ministry of Justice and the Zhongjing Temple were controlled by the old party, at least Zhang Chun was in the Zhongjing Temple. In the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xian received the document and said to the director of the Ministry of Justice, "Open the prison." Soon, a carriage drove out of the Ministry of Justice and slowly into the palace, heading in the direction of the Zhongjing Temple. The Zhongjing Temple mostly dealt with the important officials of the imperial court and the royal family's disciples. In consideration of their dignity, they did not want the people to throw vegetables and eggs at them when they were escorting important people through the streets. The prisoner carriage of the Zhongjing Temple was a modified carriage, sealed and hidden. In the Zhongjing Temple, Prince Shou was lying in the courtyard of the Zhongjing Temple, basking in the sun. When he saw the carriage enter the Zhongjing Temple, he asked, "Who committed the crime this time?" Minister Feng, who was squatting beside him and fanning him, said, "It's Li Yi's daughter. It's said that she killed 5 officials outside and was brought back to Fairy's capital by the Office of Worship. She's waiting for trial." Li Yi. Prince Shou narrowed his eyes as if he was lost in his memories. Minister Feng said, "It's that Li Yi who caused a huge ruckus in Fairy's capital more than 10 years ago. Later, his entire family was executed. I didn't expect that there would be one left out. Li Yi from more than 10 years ago, and now Li Mu. Why is this surnamed Li not to be trifled with?" As he spoke, he thought of something and said to Prince Shou, "Your Highness, you have to take care of that Zhang Chun. I don't know what he's thinking, but he arranged for Li Yi's daughter's cell to be the same as the wedding room. Not only did he choose the largest and most spacious cell, he even arranged for people to clean it inside and out. He changed the big bed, brand new bedding, and even a mirror and dressing table. He even locked all the prisoners around that cell elsewhere and hung curtains around the cell. How is this a prison at the Zhongjing Temple? She's clearly a young mistress. I just want to bask in the sun. Why do you have so much nonsense to say?" Prince Shou glared at him and said, "Are you very free? If you have nothing to do, go wash all the toilets. Don't bother me here." Minister Feng was stunned and said, "Your Highness," Prince Shou said angrily, "Go." In the Zhongjing Temple's outhouse, Minister Feng was washing the toilets gloomily. In the courtyard, Prince Shou was lying on a rocking chair with his hands behind his head. He sighed and said, "What a pity. Why are young people so impulsive?" In the Zhongjing Temple's prison, Zhang Chun stood outside the cell and shook his head. "I didn't expect Constable Li to be Lord Li Yi's daughter. Back then I also admired him very much." Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun and said, "I'll leave the boss to you." Zhang Chun said, "Don't worry. As long as she's in the Zhongjing Temple, no one will dare to touch her." He looked at Li Mu and asked, "What do you plan to do?" Whether it's to redress Lord Li Yi's grievances or to exonerate Li Qing's crimes, it's not that simple. At present, Li Qing's matter was naturally Li Mu's greatest concern and also the most urgent matter. But if he wanted to save Li Qing, he had to redress her father's case first. If Li Qing's identity was still that of a treacherous official who had colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country, then what Li Qing did was a complete blow and revenge. She had killed many officials of the imperial court and should be sentenced to death according to the law. If Li Mu insisted on saving her, he would be going against the law and above the law. In this way, what difference would there be between him and those people he despised? However, if Li Yi's identity was that of a loyal official who was set up by a villain and had his entire family exterminated, then his daughter avenged his family's death. Even if it was against the law, it would still be righteous. Under the premise that the imperial court had lost its righteousness, there was still mercy outside the law. After all, the 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel were the ones who had directly framed Li Yi. They had framed a 4th-rank official of the imperial court and caused his family to be killed unjustly. These 4 people were already sentenced to death. Under such circumstances, Li Mu had a slight chance of saving Li Qing. And the premise of all this was that he had to redress Li Yi's case first. Li Mu walked into the cell in front of him. The shackles on Li Qing's body had already been removed and her mana had also been unsealed. Li Mu walked to her side and sat down. He said, "Give me your hand." Li Qing slowly handed her hand to Li Mu. His hand emitted a gentle golden light which slowly entered Li Qing's body. Li Mu said, "I can't get you out right away. I may have to trouble you for a while. Stay here for now." Li Qing looked around and said, "This should be the best room I've ever stayed in." Li Mu looked at her and said, "Don't worry, I will investigate the matter of that year as soon as possible and clear Lord Li's name." Li Qing shook her head slightly and said, "Now I understand that my father doesn't want revenge. He and Uncle Zhou have more important things to do. I hope you can help my father finish what he couldn't before he died. Don't ruin your future for me." Li Mu smiled and said, "Only children make choices. I choose both." He looked into Li Qing's eyes and said, "Someone has already done the first thing. If I can't save you, then the second thing is meaningless to me. Let Zhou Zhong finish his and Uncle Zhou's dreams. At worst, I'll take you back to Fulu School. We don't want to stay in Fairy's capital anymore." As Li Mu finished speaking, he heard Mr. May's voice. He turned around and saw the Empress and Mr. May standing at the door. The Empress looked at him indifferently and turned to leave. Seeing Mr. May winking at him, Li Mu looked at Li Qing and said, "I'll go out for a while." After comforting Li Qing, Li Mu hurried out of Zongjing Temple, but he couldn't see the Empress anymore. He jogged to the entrance of Changle Palace. Mr. May looked inside the palace and gave him a look. Li Mu walked slowly into the palace and looked at the Empress who had her back to him. He whispered, "Your Majesty." Zhou Qiong said indifferently, "Why did you come looking for me? Go back to your talisman school. Being a 2nd-generation disciple of the talisman school is much better than being a subordinate of mine." After comforting one, he had to comfort the other. Li Mu wanted to slap his own mouth a few times. He squeezed out a smile and said, "Your Majesty, what are you talking about? I haven't repaid your Majesty's kindness. How could I leave Shindu?" Zhou Yi said indifferently. "My kindness is nothing compared to a random woman in your heart, right?" Li Mu said slowly, "She's not a random woman. If it weren't for her, I would have died many times over. I wouldn't be standing in front of your Majesty now." He looked up at the Empress and said, "I want to ask your Majesty for a favor." Zhou Yi's back was facing Li Mu. She looked angry. She was still angry, but he was begging her again. She took a deep breath and asked, "If I don't agree, are you going to take her back to Fulu School?" The Empress was still angry. Li Mu lowered his head and said, "I know I'm wrong." Zhou Yi turned around and looked at him. Her lips moved, but she couldn't bear to blame him anymore. She asked, "What's your relationship with her?" Li Mu said, "When we were in Yangqiu County, she was my superior. She saved my life and led me onto the path of cultivation. Her father is Lord Li Yi. I've always looked up to Lord Li Yi as my role model. I can't turn a blind eye to his family's wrongful death. I have to help him." Zhou Yi asked, "How do you want me to help you? Give you a death exemption medallion?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "If your Majesty gives me a death exemption medallion, how is that different from the previous emperor? I can't frame your majesty. I just hope that your majesty can allow me to reinvestigate the case and prove Lord Li's innocence. Zhou Yi said, even if I let you reinvestigate, you might not be able to save her. You really don't want me to pardon her? Li Mu said firmly, I only want to reinvestigate the case. Zhou Yi was silent for a moment. She said, I promise you before you find out the truth, no one can touch her for any reason. Li Mu sighed and said, Thank you, your majesty. Li Mu left Changle Palace. Mr. Mei came in and said, Actually in his heart he's always been thinking about your majesty. Zhou Yi snorted and said, Heartless. I'm afraid he only wants to go back to Fulu school. He said he would go through fire and water for me, but it's all fake. Mr. Mei knew that the Empress didn't mean what she said, so he deliberately said, If he didn't think about your majesty, he would have asked your majesty to pardon the girl directly. Why would he just ask your majesty to allow him to reinvestigate the case? In the past he wasn't afraid of anything and dared to offend anyone. Now he cares about the court and thinks about your majesty. Your majesty, please don't blame him. After leaving Changle Palace, Li Mu returned to Zhongjing Temple. He told Li Qing that the Empress had agreed to let him reinvestigate the case of the past. After feeling his determination several times, Li Qing didn't insist. She just said, You have to be careful. Li Mu smiled and said, Don't worry. I've already offended them anyway. It doesn't matter if I offend them a few more times. You rest well. I'll come see you tomorrow. He walked out of the cell, but his heart was still heavy. To save Li Qing was actually more difficult than to reverse the verdict for his father. At one point he really wanted to ask the Empress for a death-free gold medallion. He also knew that as long as he asked, the Empress would give it to him. But he gave up in the end. He didn't want to put the Empress in a difficult position, and he didn't want to become the person he used to hate the most. There was also a very important point. Back then, Li Yi strongly opposed the death-free gold medallion. This was also one of the reasons why he was framed. If Li Mu begged the Empress to use the death-free gold medallion to pardon Li Qing, then the thing that Li Yi swore to fight against back then would become a joke. Similarly, what Li Mu did in the divine capital during this period of time would also become a joke. Big. Small. In the courtyard of Zhongjing Temple, Prince Shou was playing dice with Zhang Chun. He glanced at Li Mu and asked, Little Li, do you want to play together? Li Qing was still in Zhongjing Temple. Li Mu couldn't not give face to Prince Shou. He walked to the side of the two and asked, What do you want to play? Prince Shou said, Guess big or small. It's very simple. Do you have money? 1 round is 1 tael. No credit. Li Mu took out a stack of banknotes and placed it at the side. Prince Shou's eyes lit up when he saw the banknotes. He said, Come. Let's bet. Prince Shou's dice and dice pot seemed to be able to block magic power. Li Mu could only guess blindly. However, his luck wasn't bad. Prince Shou lost 10 rounds in a row. He had lost all the money he had. His eyes were red from losing. He picked up the dice pot and said, Let's bet again. Zhang Chun kept his winnings. He glanced at Prince Shou and said, Your Highness, you have lost all your money. What are you going to bet with? Prince Shou flew into a rage. How dare you look down on me? Smack. He slammed a gold medal on the table and said, I still have this. The gold medal was the size of a palm. The word, exempt, was written on it. Li Mu looked at Prince Shou thoughtfully and said, Your Highness, this gold medal is very precious. You should keep it well. It won't be good if you lose, Prince Shou said angrily. Even you think I will lose? Let me tell you, when I was invincible in the Immortal's capital, you were still in your mother's womb. Come. I still want to recoup my losses. Li Mu shook his head and said, This gold medal is stained with too much blood. If your Highness dares to lose, we don't dare to take it. Hearing Li Mu's words, Prince Shou kept the gold medal and said, I almost forgot. If you guys take the gold medal to save that girl, wouldn't I become a traitor? Prince Shou clicked his tongue and said, What a pity. The only thing that can save that girl is this gold medal. She killed so many officials. No one can save her. Unless you have the ability to reverse the verdict for her father and let His Majesty announce this case to the world. Then let the people of the 36 counties write a blood letter to plead for her so that the imperial court won't dare to kill her. He looked at Li Mu mockingly and asked, Do you have the ability? Chapter 359. Li Mu and Zhang Chun walked out of the imperial ancestral temple and left the imperial palace together. Zhang Chun was silent for a long time before he suddenly asked, Li Mu, did you grow up in Xianxia County? Li Mu was thinking about something else, so he asked casually, why are you asking this? Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, I'm just asking. By the way, why do you think King Shou is so good to you? Li Mu shook his head and said, who knows? Li Mu couldn't think of a reason why King Shou would always give them pointers at critical moments. Maybe he was just doing it for justice. After all, human nature was complicated, and you can't label a person as good or evil just because of their background or faction. Regardless of the reason, King Shou's words did make Li Mu suddenly see the light. What does the continuation of the Great Zhou rely on? It's not the imperial court, not the imperial family, but the people. It's the psyche power of the people. What the imperial court is most afraid of is losing the people's hearts. They may not care about a city, but they won't care about a county, 10 counties, or even 36 counties. The law of the Great Zhou is to protect the weak in the people, but this is only on the surface. The existence of the law is to maintain the rule of the imperial court. Because only when the people live and work in peace can the psyche power be continuously produced, the emperor's qi can be nurtured, and the upper realm powerhouses of the imperial family can be endlessly produced, ensuring the stability of the country. No matter how fierce the imperial court is, the prosperity of the Great Zhou will always be the goal of everyone. King Shou's words can be said to have awakened the people in the dream. Li Mu walked out of the imperial palace. Unexpectedly, there were already many people outside the imperial palace. Seeing Li Mu walk out, they immediately surrounded him. Lord Li, how is it? His Majesty didn't punish you, right? Lord Li was too impulsive. You shouldn't have fought with that person. Isn't this dirtying your hands? Feeling the concern of the people, Li Mu smiled and said, everyone, don't worry. His Majesty is a righteous person. How could he punish me? A man breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, that's good, that's good. Lord Li is worthy of being His Majesty's favorite minister. If I knew this would happen, I would have hit him harder. Break his legs. This kind of treacherous person, it's not too much. Lord Li's family, he will die a horrible death. Among the crowd, the Lord Li Mu, Lord Li is Lord Li E, Lord Li was Li is? The crowd also looked at Li Mu. With a profound look in his eyes, Li Mu said, official Li E is the role model of our generation. I know. Lord is brave. Lord Li died. S. Li Li's house. Even now we still can't take it lying down. The crowd was filled with righteous indignation as they spoke one after another. At this moment the man bit his lip and suddenly looked at Li Mu. He said, my lord, can you save Lord Li's daughter? She's Lord Li's only child left in this world. Stop talking. The middle-aged man glared at him and said in a deep voice, do you want to kill, sir? Sighs could be heard from the crowd. Yes, Lord Li was the enemy of all the nobles back then. Now those people are in high positions. Lord Li, it's best not to provoke them. Forget it. Lord Li, you can go ahead. You can't follow in Lord Li's footsteps. The man's eyes were filled with tears. He choked and said, if it wasn't for Lord Li, my family would have died in Fairy's capital. I can't watch Lord Li die. His voice was mournful. The people around Li Mu lowered their heads. Their eyes were filled with suppressed anger. Lord Li had served the people wholeheartedly, but his family was ruined and his descendants were about to die. On the other hand, those who had framed him had become heroes, enjoying endless glory and wealth, riding on the heads of the common people and abusing them. They could do nothing about it except feel indignant. A man of 7 feet could not help but sob in front of everyone on the streets of Fairy's capital. No one laughed. Everyone's mood was very heavy. The man lowered his head. As he sobbed and trembled, a pair of hands landed gently on his shoulders. Li Mu patted him on the shoulder and said, don't worry. Lord Li won't die. He won't be wronged forever. The man raised his head and said in shock, Lord Li. Lord Li. Lord Li. The people looked at Li Mu. They seemed to have realized something. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Li residence. When Li Mu walked through the door, Hyun Jinko and Yuzhen Zi in the courtyard sensed something strange. Hyun Jinko turned to look. The moment Li Mu stepped into the courtyard, he felt as if the world was pressing down on him. This was a force. It was a force that should not exist on a fourth realm cultivator. Yuzhen Zi said in disbelief. His psychokinesis has already formed a force. No wonder his cultivation progress is so fast. Very few people can complete psychokinesis cultivation. Li Mu retracted his newly acquired psychokinesis back into his body. Lu Hanyan walked over quickly and asked, "How is it?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "She's safe for now. But to save her we have to think about it carefully." Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and asked, "Can't we ask Her Majesty to pardon her?" Li Mu said, "It's not that easy. But it's okay. Her Majesty has already agreed to let me reinvestigate Lord Li Yi's case. After Lord Li's case is overturned, things will be much simpler. Actually, he only begged the Empress today to show her his attitude. This case involved too many people. Whether Li Mu proposed it or the Empress ordered it, they would definitely encounter great resistance. Back then, Li Yi offended the rich and powerful. Among them were the Shao royal family and the Zhou clan. They indirectly contributed to the massacre of the Li clan. Of course, they would not let Li Mu reinvestigate the old case so easily. Therefore, Li Mu needed help. Help that even the great Zhou court could not ignore. He walked into the courtyard and said, "Senior brother Hyun Jinko, there's something I need your help with." Hyun Jinko said, "Junior brother, there's no harm in asking." "You're welcome." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I might need you to return to Mount Baiyun and meet senior brother sect master personally." Ministry of Justice. In the assistant minister's office, the right assistant minister of personnel looked at Zhou Xian and asked with a frown, "That Li clan survivor was taken away by the imperial clan temple. Why didn't you stop them?" Zhou Xian asked, "The official documents of the Secretariat have Her Majesty's imperial seal on them. Who would dare to stop them?" Gao Hong stroked the short beard on his chin and asked in confusion, "But why did the Secretariat want to transfer her to the imperial clan temple?" Zhou Xian said, "That official document was written by Li Mu. In my opinion, he probably wants to overturn the case for Li Yi." Gao Hong looked at him and said, "If I remember correctly, Li Yi was once Lord Zhou's close friend. Why? Does Lord Zhou not want to see him be convicted?" Zhou Xian looked at him calmly and asked, "Are you a pig?" Gao Hong slammed the table and said angrily, "What did you say?" Qin Jian, the left assistant minister of personnel whose injuries were almost healed after taking a pill, walked over and said, "Lord Gao, your question is a little stupid. Back then Lord Zhou was also involved in the impeachment of Li Yi. If Li Yi's case is overturned, you, me and even Lord Zhou will be sentenced to death. Do you think he would seek his own death?" The right assistant minister of personnel sat down again and said, "My apologies, Lord Zhou. I was rash." Qin Jian said angrily, 14 years ago Li Yi. 14 years later Li Mu. Does this Li guy have a grudge against us? As long as we don't get rid of him, we won't have a day of peace. Zhou Xian said, "If you want to get rid of him, why don't you think about it? If he really wants to overturn the case for Li Yi, won't you and I be in danger?" Qin Jian laughed coldly and said, "Then he still needs to find evidence. It's easy to prove that he colluded with the enemy and committed treason. 14 years have passed. How can he prove that Li Yi didn't collude with the enemy and commit treason? Even if he proves it, then what? Zhou Chuan is also involved in this matter. Do you want His Majesty to execute his uncle? Even if His Majesty dotes on Li Mu and doesn't recognize his own family, how can the courtiers agree to it? If this case isn't investigated, the imperial court will still be the imperial court. If this case is investigated, the imperial court might not be the imperial court anymore. When that time comes, the imperial court will be in chaos. The 10 devil path sects, the country of 10,000 demons, and the ghost region of Yudu will all become restless. His Majesty might not be able to see these things clearly, but do you think those old fogies in the imperial court won't be able to see it clearly? Zhou Xian nodded and said, "After hearing Lord Chen's words, I feel much more at ease." Qin Jian said proudly, "Lord Zhou might be better at solving cases than I am, but you still have to learn from me when it comes to matters of the imperial court." Changle Palace. There was no morning assembly today. Zhou Yi read a few memorials and felt a little annoyed. He asked, "Where's Li Mu? Did he go to the minister province today?" Mr. Mei said, "I saw him go directly to the imperial kitchen just now." Zhou Yi thought about it and said, "Go to the minister province later and see if there are any new tributes. Send some to him." Mr. Mei smiled and said, "Yes." She was about to leave when Shangguan Li walked in from outside. Zhou Yi said, "Ali, go to the imperial kitchen and see what Li Mu cooked today." Shangguanli said, when I passed by the imperial kitchen just now, I saw Li Mu come out from there. Zhou Yi asked, you didn't come with him? Shangguanli shook his head and said, he went in the direction of the imperial clan temple. Zhou Yi was stunned for a moment. The next moment he looked at the door of the hall and said, Mei Wei, come back. Chapter 360. The Empress had told Li Mu not to bring food from home, but to cook in the imperial kitchen, which reminded Li Mu of something. The taste of takeout couldn't be compared to the food in the kitchen. The food box could only keep the food warm, but it couldn't preserve the taste. The best time to appreciate most of the food was when it was just out of the pot. Fortunately, the ancestral temple was in the palace. It was only a few steps away, so the taste of the food wouldn't change too much. Compared to the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court, the imperial prison of the ancestral temple was of a much higher standard. The prisoners here were either rich or noble. They were either relatives of the emperor or high-ranking officials. Especially in the past, the ancestral temple was a shelter for the descendants of the imperial family after they committed crimes. The facilities and treatment inside were far from what the other government offices could compare to. Especially after Zhang Chun's special arrangement, if the prison of the Ministry of Justice was a standard single room for 7 days, then the one Li Qing of the ancestral temple was now living in the Hilton Hotel's presidential suite. The food in the ancestral temple should be good, but Li Mu was still worried that she wouldn't be used to it. Inside the ancestral temple, the morning sun was just right. Zhang Chun and Prince Shou sat in the courtyard of the ancestral temple, basking in the sun while drinking tea. Zhang Chun personally brewed a cup for Prince Shou and asked with a smile, Your Highness, this is a good tea that I've collected. Try it. Prince Shou took a small sip and said, Not bad. I didn't expect you to be a tea lover. Do you have any more of this tea? Give me 8 to 10 caddies. I'll take it back and drink it slowly, Zhang Chun said regretfully. Unfortunately, this is the last pinch. Prince Shou looked at him with disdain. He suddenly sniffed and said, What's this smell? It's so fragrant. Zhang Chun's nose also sniffed. After recalling the aftertaste, he murmured, This smell, why is it so similar to the smell of the noodle stall on the street outside the county office when I was in Yangqiu County? He couldn't help but gulp and said, That old woman's noodles are really amazing. I really want to try it again. Li Mu carried the food box and walked into the ancestral temple. He greeted Zhang Chun and said, I'm going to deliver the food to the boss. Zhang Chun had already warned the officers of the imperial prison of the Zongjing temple. When they saw Li Mu coming in from afar, the guard in charge of the imperial prison opened the door. Before Li Mu entered the prison, Zhang Chun walked over and asked, You cooked noodles? Li Mu nodded and said, The boss used to like eating noodles from that restaurant the most. Zhang Chun rubbed his hands and said, This official also likes this. Do you have any more? Give this official a bowl. Mr. Zhang had helped him a lot this time and Li Mu was too embarrassed to refuse. He said, If you want to eat, come to the imperial kitchen later. All right. Zhang Chun nodded before asking in astonishment, Did you cook these noodles in the imperial kitchen? What else? Cough, cough. Zhang Chun covered his mouth and coughed a few times. Suddenly he said, This official suddenly doesn't want to eat so much. I'll go home and eat what my wife cooks. Quickly go and deliver it to Constable Li. It won't taste good if you're late. Watching Li Mu walk into the prison, Zhang Chun sighed and said, Li Mu, you have to be careful. Li Mu walked into the prison and faintly heard Zhang Chun talking about snacks. Mr. Zhang reminded him again to take 2 boxes of snacks from the imperial kitchen tomorrow. The imperial chef in the palace specialized in making pastries, and his skills could be said to be superb. When he went back in the afternoon, he would also bring a box for Lu Hanyan. In the past, Li Mu couldn't take things from the imperial kitchen, but it was different now. The Empress gave him permission to enter the imperial kitchen and use all the ingredients. Although this was suspected of abusing power for personal gain, Li Mu did it deliberately. What the Empress needed was not an imperial chef. If he followed the rules and did what an imperial chef should do, wouldn't he really become an imperial chef? Li Mu learned from palace dramas that the most favored concubine of the emperor was definitely not the kind of concubine who was obedient and had no personality at all. Within the limits, occasionally doing something out of line, sometimes maintaining a sense of novelty and mystery, would be able to obtain the emperor's favor for a long time. Of course, he wasn't the empress's concubine, but he could infer many things from one example. It was the same as being a friend or an official. He asked the jailer to open the prison door and walked in. He opened the food box and said, "I don't know if the food of the Zhongxing temple is to your liking. I've cooked a bowl of noodles for you." Li Qing picked up the chopsticks and tasted it. She said in surprise, "The taste of this noodles." Li Mu smiled and said, "I learned it from the old woman who sold noodles. The taste is about the same as the one she made, right?" Li Qing said softly, "Later on I went back to Xianxia County once and learned that the old woman had passed away. Her son and daughter-in-law continued to run the noodle stall, but the noodles they cooked were different from before. I thought that I would never be able to taste the same taste as before in this life." Li Mu smiled and said, "Whenever you want to eat it, just tell me. I'll make it for you." After watching Li Qing finish the noodles, Li Mu sat for a while longer. He packed up the food box and walked to the imperial kitchen. In the imperial kitchen, there was still the soup he made for the empress. Using the empress's kitchen to cook noodles for someone else and leaving her aside, even if Li Mu was really stupid, he wouldn't do such a stupid thing. It was just that the empress's soup took a little longer to cook. Li Mu went to the imperial clan temple and waited for a little while before the soup was ready. It was said that he relied on women to make a living. After Li Mu's unremitting efforts, now the empress and Li Qing both relied on him to make a living. Li Mu carried the soup and came to the entrance of Chang'an Palace. Shangguanli stood at the entrance of the palace and glanced at him. "Her Majesty is not here. You can go back." Li Mu said regretfully, "What a pity. I boiled this soup for Her Majesty for more than 4 hours. It won't taste good after a while. I'll bring it back to the secretariat and drink it myself." Just as he turned around, Shangguanli's ears twitched and said, "Her Majesty has returned." Li Mu handed the soup in his hand to him and said, "I have to go back to the secretariat. I'll have to trouble Commander Shangguan to bring it in for Her Majesty." Shangguanli carried the soup into Chang'an Palace and placed it on the table in front of Zhou Yi. After opening the lid of the soup, a fresh and rich aroma floated out. Mr. May's throat moved and he smiled. "I knew it. How could he forget Her Majesty? This soup has been simmering for so long. He must have put in a lot of effort. I just went to the imperial kitchen and asked." He only sent a bowl of noodles to the imperial clan temple. Zhou Yi drank a mouthful of soup and suddenly felt a little embarrassed. It seemed that she had misunderstood Li Mu just now. She thought that he was using her imperial kitchen to curry favor with others. She was angry for a while, but at this moment, the anger in her heart immediately disappeared. She said, "Mei Wei, send 2 boxes of Southern Tribute oranges to him." Mr. May said, "Didn't Her Majesty say that the oranges were very sour and she didn't want to send them?" Zhou Yi said, "Now that I think about it, the oranges don't seem so sour anymore." Mr. May nodded and said, "I'll go now." Zhou Yi suddenly said, "Wait." The secretariat. Li Mu sat in the duty room for a while. After dealing with the official business for the day, he sat quietly for a while and began to write an official document. This official document ordered the Ministry of Justice to reinvestigate the case of Li Yi from 14 years ago. Li Mu had asked the Empress about this matter, but he couldn't let the Empress give the order directly. As the ruler of a country, she should have the concept of the overall situation. If she overturned half of the court just because of Li Mu's words, then what would the court officials think? They would think that this was a treacherous courtier trying to overthrow the government. When an emperor ignored the overall situation of the court and the people of the Great Zhou because of a certain courtier or concubine, the courtiers would unite to oppose her because this was a sign of the collapse of the country. The courtiers would not allow it, and the 4 academies would not sit idly by. In fact, compared to this matter, whether or not Li Yi was wronged or not was not that important anymore. Therefore, Li Mu had to show that although the Empress doted on him, there was a limit. Once he exceeded that limit, he was afraid that he would be removed in the name of cleaning up the emperor's side. Before he finished writing the official document in his hand, Mr. May came. She placed 2 boxes of oranges on the table in front of Li Mu and said, "These are the tribute oranges from South Commandery. Her Majesty asked me to give you 2 boxes to try." Li Mu said, "Thank Her Majesty for me." Mr. May said, "Her Majesty doesn't want your thanks." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "What else does Her Majesty want?" He had already given the Empress everything he could. She could not reward Li Mu with 2 boxes of oranges and ask for too much from him. Mr. May glanced at him and said, In the future, no matter if you make soup or noodles in the imperial kitchen, send it to Changle Palace first. Li Mu was stunned and asked, "This is Her Majesty's idea?" Mr. May knocked him on the head and said, "Her Majesty is so broad-minded. Would she be angry because you sent her soup later?" Only she believed this sentence. No one knew how stingy the Empress was better than Li Mu. Li Mu nodded helplessly and said, "I know. No matter what I do in the future, I will think of Her Majesty first. Is that okay?" After that he was knocked on the head again. Mr. May glanced at him and asked, "What's with your tone? It sounds like Her Majesty is forcing you to send the soup first." Li Mu promised her that he was willing to give priority to the Empress. Only then did Mr. May leave with satisfaction. Li Mu looked at her back and felt that she was getting more and more strange these days. If this continued, it would be really difficult for her to get married. But Li Mu had more important things to do and did not have time to give her psychological counseling. He finished writing the official document, took 2 tribute oranges and went to the assistant minister's office. Lu Yi was reading the booklet. Li Mu walked over and put the 2 oranges on his table. He said, "Mr. Lu, take a rest and eat an orange." Lu Yi looked at the 2 oranges and said in surprise, "It's not the season for oranges yet. There are a few mother trees in Nanjun that will bear fruit a month or 2 earlier, but the spiritual oranges on the mother trees are used as tributes." Li Mu smiled and said, "This is the tribute oranges given by Her Majesty." Lu Yi looked at Li Mu with envy and said, "Mr. Li, you are really enviable. There are not many spiritual oranges and there is not enough for the palace every year. It is difficult for the officials outside to get one. In the time of the former emperor, only the empress and the imperial noble concubines could get a box." He only picked up 1 orange and said, "I only need one of these treasures. I didn't expect to taste spiritual oranges from my hometown in Luoyang." Li Mu said, "So Mr. Lu's hometown is Nanjun. It's okay. Mr. Lu, you can eat as much as you want. If it's not enough, I have more. Her Majesty gave me 2 boxes." Lu Yi was not only envious but also shocked. Back then, the Empress Dowager and Imperial Concubine Dowager were so favored by the previous emperor, but they only received 2 chests in total. His Majesty actually rewarded Li Mu with 2 chests. It was true that she only favored 1 person in all the court officials. He peeled an orange and ate a few pieces. He praised, "It is indeed a carefully cultivated tribute. If a mortal can eat one, they will not be invaded by diseases for 3 years." The 2 chatted for a while. Li Mu took out the document and said, "By the way, there is another document here that needs your signature. It's a small matter." Lu Yi picked up the document. She picked up the pen and was about to sign her name. Then his body trembled. The pen in his hand did not fall. He looked at the document and fell into a long silence. After a while, he looked up at Li Mu and said with some bitterness, "Mr. Li, I only ate half of your orange." Chapter 361. Li Mu looked at Lu Yi and said with a smile, "Lord Lu, this is a spirit orange carefully cultivated by the South Commandery. If a mortal can eat one, they will not be invaded by diseases for 3 years." Lu Yi was speechless for a moment. Finally, he sighed and asked, "Have you thought about it, Lord Li?" Li Mu said, "I once made a great vow to establish my heart for the world and my life for the people. How can I watch the heroes of the great Zhou be framed by villains and leave behind a torrent of infamy in history?" Lu Yi picked up the pen helplessly and said, "Give me 2 more oranges." Li Mu stretched out his hand and 2 more spirit oranges appeared in his hand. Lu Yi signed his name on the document and shook his head. "I hope Lord Li has good luck." Li Mu clasped his fist and said, "Thank you, Lord Lu." Lu Yi waved his hand and said, "You're welcome. This document has to be handed over." "It's useless for me to sign it," Li Mu said again. "Lord Lu, please give this to the head of the secretariat." When he left the assistant minister's office, he took away the orange peel on the table and threw it away for Lu Yi. Lu Yi hurriedly said, "Lord Li, please wait. I'll soak the orange peel in water." Ordinary people could not even get the orange peel of the spirit orange that was specially offered by the royal family. Li Mu decided to finish the orange and collect the orange peel. In the future, when he asked Lu Yi for help, he would give him a few taels each time. After all, it was not good to ask for help empty-handed. Li Mu alone could not make the decision to reinvestigate the old case from 14 years ago. After his proposal, it needed to go through the assistant minister and head of the secretariat first. Then it would be handed over to the minister for review. Finally, it would be handed over to the minister for implementation. Li Mu could only deal with Lu Yi. The Lu family was one of the oldest surnames in the Great Zhou. It was one of the 9 surnames. Although it was not as powerful as the Xiao family and the Zhou family in the imperial court, it could not be underestimated. At the very least, Lu Yi did not have to be afraid of the old and new parties. When Lu Yi saw Li Mu walk out of the assistant minister's office, she put away the orange peel, picked up the document and went to another office. He placed the booklet on the table and said, "Sir, this booklet is from Li Sharon." The head of the secretariat stroked the long beard on his chin and opened the booklet. After looking at it, he pondered for a moment and signed his name on it. He handed it back to Lu Yi and said, "Pass it to the door." Moments later in Minxiao province. It was a letter from the secretariat. After it was delivered to the Minxiao province, it was passed down through the ranks until it finally reached the hands of 2 attendants. The attendant was a provincial official. The 2 of them looked at the booklet in front of them and fell silent. Censorate Li Mu of the secretariat submitted a memorial, requesting that the case of left assistant minister Li Yi of the Ministry of Appointments, who had colluded with the enemy and committed treason 14 years ago, be reopened. The resolution of the secretariat was passed and submitted to the Ministry of Interior for discussion. If a 4th-ranked official of the imperial court was framed for the extermination of his family or was framed for treason, it was only natural that he would be thoroughly investigated. However, the implications of this case were too broad. Both the old and new parties were implicated. It was fine if the case could not be reopened. Once the case was reopened, 2 out of the 6 ministers of the imperial court would be sentenced to death. One of them was the important minister of the Ministry of Appointments. Other than the ministers of the Ministry of Appointments and the Ministry of Works, the 2 assistant ministers of the Ministry of Appointments would be sentenced to death. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice would be sentenced to death. Even if the other high-ranking officials in the imperial court were not sentenced to death, they would not be able to escape severe punishment. In this way, the imperial court would be in chaos. Perhaps it would give an opportunity to those with ulterior motives. Compared to this matter, whether or not Li Yi was wronged was not so important. One of the attendants shook his head and said, "The big picture is more important." The other attendant nodded and said, "Agree." Li Mu ate 2 oranges. Before he went to the yamen, the booklet he had handed out was returned to his hands. His request to reinvestigate Li Yi's case was rejected by the Ministry of Family Affairs. In the 3 provinces, the Secretariat of the Secretariat wrote the edict in the tone of the Emperor and had to be submitted to the Ministry of Interior for review. If the Ministry of Interior passed, they would sign their review opinion on the edict and send it back to the Secretariat. The Secretariat would pass it to the Emperor. After the Emperor gave his final approval, it would be sent back to the Ministry of Interior. If the Ministry of Interior did not pass, they would also send the memorial back to the Secretariat. Sometimes they would let the Secretariat revise it before sending it back. Sometimes they would just write the word reject and directly reject it, not giving anyone a chance. The booklet on Li Mu's desk had the word reject written at the end. This meant that the Ministry of Interior did not agree to reopen the case. This kind of thing was very normal. Not to mention the Secretariat, they even dared to reject the Emperor's opinion. They could be said to be the most ruthless department in the imperial court. Of course, if the Empress was stubborn, she could bypass the Ministry of Interior and directly give the order. But in that way, the order in the imperial court would be in chaos. This was not what Li Mu wanted. In any case, he did not expect the Ministry of Interior to agree. This booklet was just a prelude. His purpose was to send a signal to those people. He had accepted Li Yi's case. After that, Li Mu did not mention this matter again. He left the Secretariat and went straight home. There were no secrets between the various departments in the imperial court. Li Mu wanted to reopen the old case of Li Yi from 14 years ago. The fact that his memorial was rejected by the Ministry of Interior spread to the various departments after it was sent to the Yamen. Ministry of Personnel. Right Assistant Minister Gao Hong had just received the news from the Ministry of Interior. He said with a dark face that Li Mu really wants to reopen the case for Li Yi. Left Assistant Minister Qin Jian sneered and said, "He wants to reopen the case? He can't even get past the Ministry of Interior. Which one of those old fellows there isn't a shrewd old man? The stability of the imperial court is what they care about." They don't care if Li Yi died unjustly, Gao Hong said worriedly, that Li Mu has the shadow of Li Yi from back then. He also has the Emperor's protection. Sooner or later he will become a big problem for us. Qin Jian said coldly, let him jump around. When he jumps around to the point where both sides can't stand it anymore, he will be the next Li Yi. Just wait and see. As long as he dares to insist on reopening the case of Li Yi, even if we don't kill him, the court officials will kill him. Regarding this matter, there were many opinions from the other ministries. This person is still so reckless. How many people are involved in Li Yi's case? This Li Mu is basically the second Li Yi. Even Li Yi back then wasn't as bold as him. It's just that this time he's too whimsical. I just don't know if the Emperor will still go along with him. Could he have fed the Emperor some kind of bewitching potion? Why is the Emperor so good to him? Apart from being a little talented and a little handsome, there's nothing special about him. The Emperor can't be so shallow as to be fooled by his looks, right? If this old case is thoroughly investigated, it will have a huge impact on the situation in the imperial court. Both the old and new parties will be greatly affected because of this, which is not conducive to the stability of the overall situation. If the Emperor ignores the overall situation and the Great Zhou for the sake of Li Mu, this is a favored official messing up the government. If he is not eliminated, the Great Zhou will not be peaceful. Once the news of Li Mu's suggestion to reopen the case of Li Yi spread, it caused widespread discussion in the imperial court. In the hearts of some of the officials, the truth of Li Yi's case was no longer important. What was important was whether the Emperor's love and care for Li Mu had reached the limit of what an official should bear. Many times, there was no clear boundary between a treacherous official and a loyal official. Although what he did was righteous, if the imperial court collapsed because of him and the Great Zhou fell into a crisis, then he would be a treacherous official who brought disaster to the country and the people. This kind of treacherous official should be eliminated by all the officials. There were even many officials who had a grudge against Li Mu. They were secretly plotting whether they should take advantage of this opportunity to join forces with their respective parties to clean up the Emperor and punish the traitorous officials. However, during the morning court, Li Mu remained silent and did not mention a single word about the old case. This was not unexpected by some officials. Perhaps he also realized that if he wanted to investigate the old case, it would involve too many people. Not only would he not be able to find any results, but he would also be implicated. Thus he was afraid of retreating. This made some people feel disappointed. Compared to Li Mu retreating in the face of difficulties, they hoped that he would walk this path to the end. This would give them a chance to get rid of him. Just like this, the matter that had caused widespread discussion in the various departments yesterday was not mentioned in the morning court today. Just as the officials thought that this matter was going to be forgotten, Mr. May walked in from outside the hall. He walked behind the curtain and seemed to say something to the Empress. Soon the Empress's voice came from behind the curtain. Enter. A figure slowly floated into the crepe myrtle hall. He bowed to the Empress behind the curtain and said, Greetings, Your Majesty. This was a middle-aged man wearing a moon-white Daoist robe. His hair was tied up in a tall crown and he looked like an immortal. On the left chest of his Daoist robe was embroidered the symbol of a white cloud. White Cloud Mountain, moon-white Daoist robe, a second-generation disciple of the Fulu school. Could he be the head of one of the peaks? What is the head of the Fulu school doing in the divine capital? The officials looked at the middle-aged man in confusion. Although the Fulu school and the imperial court cooperated, it was limited to low-level disciples. This was the first time they saw such an important figure of the Fulu school in the divine capital, in this golden hall. The Empress asked calmly, Taoist Hyun Jinko, why have you come to the divine capital? Hyun Jinko said, I am here on the orders of the headmaster for one person. The Empress asked, Who? Hyun Jinko said, Her name is Li Qing. She is the direct disciple of the headmaster. Most of the officials in the imperial court did not know who Li Qing was. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel's expression changed slightly. He walked forward and said, Li Qing has killed many imperial court officials and is a serious criminal. Does the Fulu school want to protect her? Hyun Jinko shook his head and said, No. The Fulu school supports the Great Zhou court. If a Fulu school disciple violates the law, the court can punish them according to the law. However, the headmaster knows that Marshal Niece Li's family was wrongly killed more than 10 years ago. He hopes that the court can follow the law and give her an explanation, and also give the Fulu school an explanation. The moment he said this, the imperial court fell silent. The assistant minister of personnel was probably talking about Li Yi's daughter. If the Fulu school wanted the court to give them an explanation, wasn't it asking the court to reinvestigate the case? If this matter was found out by Li Mu, the provincial court would reject the case and it would be over. However, the Fulu school was a colossus that was not inferior to the Great Zhou court. Mount Baiyun was located in the extreme north of the Great Zhou. The ancestral court of Fulu school was the Great Zhou's first line of defense against the Yao kingdom and the Ghost realm in the north. Their orthodoxy was spread throughout the Great Zhou. The court could only be kind and not evil. However, for the sake of the Fulu school, reinvestigating the case of the past would cause unrest in the court. Of course, this was not allowed. The court had to lower their stance and calmly reason with the Fulu school. Even if they refused, they had to show the court's sincerity. This way even they could not force the court. One of the attendants stood up and cleared his throat. Just as he was about to speak, an angry roar suddenly came from the front of the court. Prince Shou's face was full of anger. He pointed at Hyun Jinko's nose and scolded, "The Great Zhou is the Great Zhou of the court. Why does the court need to explain its actions to others? Who does your Fulu school think you are? How dare you teach the court how to do things?" Chapter 362. The moment King Shou spoke, some of the officials in the imperial court knew that something was amiss. Most of the people involved in Li Yi's case were from the old party. Even if King Shou didn't want to reopen the case, he couldn't speak to a peak master of Fulu school like this. Among the 6 sects of Dao, only Fulu school and Xuanzong were located in Great Zhou. Xuanzong was located in the east, and there weren't any powerful enemies in the east of Great Zhou. However, things were different in the north. The country of demons and the Hades domain were both located in the northwest. The ancestral court of Fulu school was located in the north, intimidating the demon country and the ghost domain. It was a solid barrier at the border of Great Zhou. Without Mount Baiyun, the demon country and the ghost domain could easily invade Great Zhou. No matter what, the imperial court couldn't become enemies with Fulu school. At the back of the hall, Zhang Chun had already opened his mouth. However, when he heard King Shou speak, he swallowed the words that were already in his throat. Hyun Jinko didn't look at King Shou. Instead, he swept his gaze across the officials and asked, "Is this the attitude of the Great Zhou court?" King Shou had a look of disdain on his face. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he was pulled back by 2 officials beside him. "Your Highness, be careful with your words." The attendant opened his mouth, but he couldn't say the words he wanted to say to delay the matter. King Shou's words left the imperial court with no way out. Now, even if the imperial court didn't want to investigate, they had to. If the imperial court really didn't care about Fulu school's request, wouldn't that mean that they didn't care about Fulu school at all? The deterioration of their relationship with Fulu school would be even more serious than the turmoil in the imperial court. In the imperial court, no one's position was irreplaceable. They just had to pay a price. However, the position of the Fulu school was truly irreplaceable. Without the Fulu school, there was no way the imperial court could send 3 seventh realms, close to 10 sixth realms and countless 5th and 4th realms to hold the fort in the northwest region. This would drain most of the imperial court's manpower. The imperial court was completely silent. Hyun Jinko spoke again. "If this is the intention of the Great Zhou court, then I will return to Mount Baiyun and pass on the court's intentions to senior brother sect leader." A moment later, Shangguanli walked out from behind the curtain and said, "Hyun Jinko, you have misunderstood. This case is of great importance. I would like to ask you to wait for 2 more days. After the imperial court has discussed this matter, we will give Fulu school an answer." Hyun Jinko said indifferently, "In 3 days I will return to Mount Baiyun. In these 3 days I will wait for the imperial court's reply." With that, he cupped his fists at the empress again and left. From behind the curtain, the empress said in a dignified voice, "Fulu school cannot be disregarded. The 3 provinces will discuss this matter together. Within 2 days, inform me of the results of the discussion." The head of the secretariat and the head of the Minister of High Affairs said in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." Standing outside the curtain, Shangguan Li's voice resounded through the hall. "Dismissed." The officials left the hall in order. On the way back to the Imperial Clan temple, one of the Imperial Clan officials said, "Your Highness, you were too impulsive. How could you scold Fulu's school?" Prince Zhou snorted and said, "What's wrong with Fulu's school? How dare the Fulu school order the Imperial court? Are they trying to rebel?" The Imperial Clan officials shook their heads and didn't say anything else. Fulu school had existed for thousands of years. Before the Great Zhou there was already a Fulu school. They had a rich foundation that outsiders couldn't imagine. Even if the Imperial court was in chaos, they couldn't make enemies with Fulu school. The Imperial Clan officials sighed. How could he expect Prince Zhou to understand these things? The reason why Prince Zhou could be in such a high position was because he was the younger brother of the previous emperor and a member of the Shao royal family. Other than watching opera and drinking tea, he didn't know anything else. If it wasn't because of his identity, the words he said in the Imperial court caused a major turn of events that the Imperial court didn't want to see. The new and old parties could make him die without a burial ground. Zhang Chun walked behind Prince Zhou and said, "Your Highness, last night I found a tale of tea cakes at home. Tomorrow I'll give you half a coin." Prince Zhou said, "Half a coin? Zhang, are you trying to dismiss a beggar? Then it's 1 coin. There's only 1 coin left. 1 tale of tea cakes left after a night. Are you going to eat it like grass?" Minister Province, Minister Office. Minister Zhou Jing sat on the main seat. There were 3 people sitting on either side of him. They were the head of the secretariat and 2 attendants. The 4 people in this room were the highest officials of the 3 provinces. They were also the leaders of the Great Zhou's ministers. Minister Zhou took a sip of tea and said, "His Majesty asked us to discuss this matter. My 3 lords, please tell us your thoughts." The left attendant stroked his long beard and said, "How could Li Yi's daughter be the disciple of the Fulu school's headmaster? This matter is too strange. They shouldn't have investigated earlier or later. Why did they have to investigate now? This is too much of a coincidence," the right attendant said. "There's no point in talking about this now. This matter could have been dealt with, but Prince Zhou's impulsiveness angered the Fulu school. If this matter isn't handled well, the Fulu school will hate him. That would be bad. But if they really want to investigate, it's fine if there's no problem. If there really is a problem, there will be a storm in the Imperial court." Minister Zhou looked at the head of the secretariat and asked, "Elder Yan, what do you think?" Of the 4 people, the head of the secretariat had been through 3 dynasties. He was the most senior. The head of the secretariat thought for a while and said, "The 2 attendants have said so much about the stability of the Imperial court. Have you thought about what if Assistant Minister Li was really wronged?" The left attendant sighed and said, "The bigger picture is more important." The head of the secretariat said slowly, "Indeed, the bigger picture is more important." When the head of the secretariat said this, the 3 people in the hall fell into silence. The left attendant and the head of the secretariat were not talking about the same big picture. Compared to the injustice Li Yi had suffered, the stability of the Imperial court was more important. Compared to the stability of the Imperial court, the relationship with the Fulu school was more important. The Imperial court was temporarily in chaos, but it would eventually return to stability. If the relationship with the Fulu school was broken, no matter how stable the Imperial court was, it would not be able to create a powerful ally like the Fulu school out of thin air. After a long silence, the left attendant said helplessly, "Investigate." The right attendant sighed and said, "We can only do this." A day later, the 3 provinces gave a reply to Li Yi's case. The Fulu school was a friend of the Great Zhou. The Imperial court attached great importance to the reasonable request of the Fulu school. The 3 provinces discussed and decided that the Supreme Court and Zhongjing Temple would work together to investigate the case of Assistant Minister Li Yi of the Ministry of Personnel. Regarding this, the Imperial Secretariat had already drafted an imperial edict, and it had been reviewed and approved. Because the case of that year involved the officials of the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Justice was purposely avoided. Usually, this kind of matter would go through the procedures of the 3 provinces. It would take at least half a month for there to be a result. This time, all the procedures were completed in 1 day. It was enough to show the sincerity of the Imperial court toward the Fulu school. This was something that could not be helped. Prince Zhou had spoken rudely to the head of the Fulu school in the Imperial court. This had already pushed the relationship between the Imperial court and the Fulu school to the brink of danger. If they did not do their best to make up for it, It would be difficult to heal the animosity between the two sides. Zhongxing Temple, the prison. Li Qing looked at Li Mu with some astonishment. She asked, "When did I become the headmaster's disciple?" Li Mu explained, "If you did not have such an identity, the imperial court would not have paid too much attention to you. However, this is not entirely a temporary measure. When you get out of here, you will become the headmaster's disciple." Li Qing shook her head. "Why would the headmaster accept me as his disciple?" Li Mu said. "He has to accept you even if he doesn't want to. Now everyone knows that you are his disciple. When the time comes when you return to Mount Baiyin, you will have to attend the disciple recruitment ceremony." Li Qing did not understand. "But why would the headmaster do this?" Li Mu rubbed his nose and said, "When you were not here, a lot of things happened. In short, now that I am also a second-generation disciple of the Fulu school, the headmaster still has to give me face." Li Qing looked at him for a long time before she came back to her senses. She asked, Then do I have to call you martial uncle?" Li Mu smiled and said, "This is nothing. Thinking about it, I am also Hanyin's martial uncle. Don't we also? In short, we can call each other our own. In the future, in front of the headmaster and several heads, you can call me martial uncle. When there is no one, I will call you boss." Chapter 363. Walking out of the Imperial Clan Temple, Li Mu thought back and realized that he seemed to have some kind of magical power. A kind of magical power that could turn people of the same generation into juniors. Whether it was Li Qing, Lu Hanyan, or the two little snakes that Li Mu hadn't seen for a long time, everyone's relationship was good at the beginning, but then it started to develop in a strange direction. Fortunately, cultivators didn't care too much about these things. As long as they were willing, they could also become Dao companions. Standing at the door of the Imperial Clan Temple, Li Mu sighed softly. It wasn't easy to save her within the rules. It was just a small step, but this small step was also the beginning of something from nothing. Li Mu had long expected that with his face, the imperial court wouldn't care at all. His memorial couldn't even be passed by the province under his tutelage. But obviously they could ignore Li Mu's face, but they couldn't ignore Fulu School's face. This matter also made Li Mu realize a fact. His strength was only supernatural power. All the status and power he had obtained came from the Empress's favor. Without the Empress he was nothing. Li Mu's face was only useful in front of the Empress. At other times face had to be matched with strength. If he had the strength of the seventh realm, this matter would have become extraordinarily simple. After lamenting for a while, Li Mu didn't go home. He came out of the Imperial Clan Temple and went to the Imperial Kitchen. Changel Palace. Zhou Yi came back from admiring the flowers in the Imperial Garden. When she walked to the front of the palace gate, she smelled a familiar fragrance. This was the unique fragrance of Li Mu's soup. She and Shangguanli walked into the palace. Mr. Mei greeted them and said, "Your Majesty is back. Li Mu just sent today's lunch." Zhou Yi walked to the table. Mr. Mei took out the lunchbox. There were 4 dishes and a soup, all of which were Zhou Yi's favorites. She walked behind the table and found that the memorials on the table had been sorted out. Most of the unimportant memorials had already been dealt with. Some of the important ones were placed on the other side. There was a piece of paper in between the memorials. There were words on the paper. It was Li Mu's handwriting that Zhou Yi was familiar with. She picked up the paper and saw that it was Li Mu's suggestions for the political affairs in the memorials. Even if it was important and required her to deal with it personally, she didn't have to think about it herself anymore. Zhou Yi sat down. As she ate the delicious food, she thought that if she could always have such a person by her side who could go to court and cook for her, who could help her review memorials and who could also cook for her, and she only needed to protect him from behind, then it seemed acceptable to let her be the emperor. It was a pity that Li Mu was already married. Otherwise, it would be a good choice for him to stay in the palace for the rest of his life. The Imperial Secretariat. Li Mu was thinking about what to do next. Suddenly he felt a chill in his crotch. His heart was suddenly alerted. However, he looked around and didn't find any danger. After eating a tribute orange to calm his nerves, Mr. Mei appeared in his yamen. The Imperial Secretariat was a secret place. Except for the officials of the Imperial Secretariat, outsiders were not allowed to enter. However, Mr. Mei was the Empress's man. She walked around the Imperial Secretariat like it was her garden, and no one dared to say anything. Li Mu was busy. After looking up at her, he lowered his head and asked, "What's the matter?" Mr. May walked in and said, "Can't I come and see if there's nothing?" Li Mu picked up a pen and wrote something on the paper. He said, "Of course, but I don't have time to entertain you right now. There's tea in the pot. Pour it yourself." There was no need to be polite with Mr. May. Li Mu was more relaxed in front of her than in front of the Empress. Mr. May didn't pour the tea. He walked behind Li Mu and asked, "What are you writing?" Li Mu said, "A script." Mr. May stood behind Li Mu and looked at him with interest. Suddenly he said, "I have a question that I've been wanting to ask you for a long time." Li Mu said casually, "What is it?" Mr. May asked, "I've read the strange stories from a Chinese studio that you wrote. Do you have any special fetishes for ghosts?" Li Mu said, "That was written by Pooh. What does it have to do with me?" Mr. May said, "There's nothing that can't be found out by the inner guard." Li Mu raised his head and said, "Then you can ask the inner guard to help you. You don't have to trouble the Zhongxing Temple and the Dali Temple with Master Li Yi's case." Mr. May coughed and said, "The inner guard was established not long ago. How can they find out something that happened more than 10 years ago? You haven't answered my question." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Of course not. I'm just treating everyone equally. There were ghosts and human women in that case. Why did you only see ghosts?" Mr. May suddenly understood and said, "I see. I thought you had some feelings for Xiao Bai." Li Mu looked at her in surprise and said, "Why do you have so many strange things to say today? You're just like His Majesty." Li Mu thought of something and said to her, "You're becoming more and more like His Majesty recently. That's not good. You're different from His Majesty. If you imitate His Majesty, you'll delay your life. You might really die alone." Mr. May crossed his arms and said, "Tell me, how am I different from His Majesty?" Li Mu said honestly, "Even if His Majesty isn't the emperor, he's still a famous beauty in Luoyang. Whether he's arrogant or gentle, he's always liked by people. Do you think you're as beautiful as His Majesty?" It was only because of Mr. May that Li Mu would say such heartfelt words to her. If it were Shangguan Li, she wouldn't be single for the rest of her life and have nothing to do with Li Mu. He wouldn't say such things that might offend people. "I know." Mr. May nodded and then asked, "Do you think His Majesty is beautiful?" Li Mu looked at her and asked, "Don't you think so?" Mr. May seemed a little embarrassed and said, Of course I think so." Li Mu picked up the pen again and said, "If there's nothing else, I'll get back to work. I have to finish writing before I go to the yamen." Mr. May didn't disturb Li Mu. He turned and walked out of the secretariat. Not long after, 2 internal guards brought another box of mandarin oranges, saying that it was a gift from the Empress. Li Mu accepted it happily. The taste of the mandarin oranges was really good. Wan Wan and Xiao Bai both liked it very much. Of the 2 boxes of mandarin oranges, a few were given to Zhang Chun and some were left for Li Qing. The rest were quickly finished by them. When he went to the yamen, Li Mu thought that Lu Yi was from South Commandery, which was thousands of miles away from Luoyang. If she could eat mandarin oranges from her hometown here, it might comfort her homesickness. In the assistant minister's office, Lu Yi looked at the 2 oranges that Li Mu handed to her and asked, "Mr. Li, haven't you finished the spiritual oranges?" Li Mu said, "Yes, but His Majesty just sent another box." "Mr. Lu, you're from South Commandery, so I want to leave 2 for you." Lu Yi looked at the oranges that Li Mu handed to her and was moved. She was about to reach out to take them when she suddenly thought of something. She suddenly withdrew her hands and said, "Mr. Li, why don't we talk about the matter first?" Li Mu looked as if he couldn't hide anything from her and said, "To be honest, I want the imperial court to search the soul of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and the others. This is the simplest way to investigate the case. I've already written the report. Mr. Lu, please sign it." Lu Yi's face froze and she said, "Mr. Li, the spiritual oranges are too precious. I can't accept it. I'm just kidding." Li Mu left the 2 oranges on the table and said, "I'm already very grateful to Mr. Lu for what happened last time. These 2 spiritual oranges are just a small token of my appreciation." Seeing Li Mu's back disappear, Lu Yi's face was full of emotion. 3 boxes of spiritual oranges. His Majesty's favor to Li Mu had already surpassed the former emperor's favor to the Empress and the imperial concubine. At this time, the Right Assistant Minister of the Hall of Governmental Affairs came in from outside and put a few reports on the table. He said, "Mr. Lu, take a look at these reports first. After we discuss them tomorrow, we'll submit them to Mr. Yen. Hey, why are there 2 oranges here? I'll take one. Stop. Lu Yi shouted, which scared the Right Assistant Minister of the Hall of Governmental Affairs. Then he realized that he had lost his composure. He put the 2 oranges in his sleeve and said, "These 2 oranges have a special meaning to me. If Mr. Su wants to eat them, I'll send you a box in a few days." Great Sound Bar. Li Mu handed a few pages of paper to the owner of the Great Sound Bar and said, "Please." The owner of the Great Sound Bar said seriously, "Don't worry, Mr. Li. I'll take care of this matter as soon as possible." After Li Mu left, the owner of the Great Sound Bar looked at the few pieces of paper in her hand. What was written on the paper was a complete play. The play was about an official of the Zhou family of the previous dynasty. Because he had offended a powerful official, he was framed by a treacherous official and his family was tragically exterminated. The surviving orphan of the Zhou family grew up and avenged his family. In the Li residence, Yu Zhenzi took a few pages of paper from Li Mu's hand and floated away. The ancestral court of Fulu School was located in Mount Baiyun. It had branches all over the 36 counties of the Great Zhou. These branches were inherited from the ancestral court and were united with it. Soon this play would appear in all the counties of the Great Zhou. Chapter 364. After making these arrangements, the following matters could not be rushed. All they could do was wait. Lu Hanyan was playing the zither in the courtyard. Li Mu listened as he peeled the spiritual orange the Empress had just given him and fed it to her. When he turned around and saw Wan Wan and Xiaobai staring at him, he also fed them a few pieces. When the song ended, Lu Hanyan turned around and asked, "How's the matter with Constable Li?" Li Mu said, "The Imperial Court has already asked the Imperial Clan Court and the Supreme Court to investigate again. Everything is going according to plan." Lu Hanyan suddenly asked, "When she left you, it was to avenge her family, right?" This question caught Li Mu off guard. From the moment Li Qing appeared in the divine capital, she had never asked Li Mu where he went or what he did every day. She had also never asked him about Li Qing. However, Li Mu knew that she definitely cared. If there was anyone in this world who could make him feel threatened, it would be Li Qing. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "She withdrew from the Fulu school. She didn't tell all her friends because she didn't want to implicate the sect in us." Lu Hanyan was silent for a moment and then whispered, "If Constable Li hadn't left at that time, could it be?" Li Mu hugged her from behind and said, "There's no if. We're already husband and wife. I've already given you my primordial yang that I've treasured for 20 years. What are you still worried about?" Lu Hanyan whispered, "I was worried that after you met Constable Li, you wouldn't want me anymore. Clearly she was the first person you met and the first person you liked." Li Mu suddenly realized that he might have been too busy with Li Qing these past few days and neglected her. Lu Hanyan seemed to be strong and opinionated, but in reality the experience of being abandoned by her parents when she was young made her easily lose her sense of security. Coincidentally, Li Qing was the person who made her feel the most insecure. Li Mu felt a little guilty. He hugged her tighter and said, "What are you thinking? If I don't want you, where can I find another pure Yin body that is so young, so beautiful, so versatile and so good in the kitchen? You will always be the first wife of the Li family. In the future, no matter who enters this family, they will have to listen to you." After being comforted by Li Mu, Lu Hanyan's worries for the past few days had disappeared. While she was feeling touched, she seemed to have realized something and asked, "Who else will enter the house in the future?" "I'm just giving an example. When you make an analogy, who are you thinking of?" Li Mu gave Xiaobai a look and Xiaobai immediately ran over. She took Lu Hanyan's hand and said, "Whether it's in the past or in the future, Sister Wan Wan and I will listen to Sister Lu." Li Mu took the opportunity to get away and said, "I'll go to old Zhang's house to ask about the progress of the case." The Zhang mansion was also in the North Court, not far from the Li mansion. Li Mu left the house and walked a few hundred steps. Inside the Zhang mansion. Think about it. How old are you? Why don't you find a husband and stay at home all day? When can you get married like this? "I won't get married, okay? You still dare to talk back." Hearing the quarrel from the inner courtyard, Zhang Chun looked helpless. At a certain moment, she noticed that the footsteps in the inner courtyard were getting closer. She immediately picked up a broom and started sweeping the yard. Mrs. Zhang walked out of the inner courtyard. She wanted to find a place to vent, but when she saw Zhang Chun cleaning the yard obediently, she didn't want to lose her temper. She turned around and walked into the inner courtyard. She shouted, "Do you think I won't scold you if you hide in the house? Open the door." As soon as Li Mu walked into the Zhang mansion, Zhang Chun threw down the broom and said, "You're finally here. If there's anything, let's talk outside." Not long after, in a wine shop on the streets of Luoyang, Zhang Chun drank a few cups and complained about his disobedient daughter and irritable middle-aged wife. Then he said, "You're here to ask about the progress of Li Yi's case, right?" Li Mu nodded and asked, "How's the investigation going?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "It's easy to prove a person's guilt, but it's harder than reaching the sky to prove his innocence. Besides, although the imperial court has compromised this time, it's only on the surface. The Zhongxing Temple and the Supreme Court won't spend too much effort. If the few minor officials who left the Ministry of Personnel were still alive, it's possible to find a breakthrough from them. But they've all died in the hands of Constable Li. And just yesterday, the only old official who had been in the Ministry of Personnel for more than 10 years was found dead in his home. He died of old age." Li Mu raised his wine cup and slowly twirled it between his fingers. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? When the imperial court wanted to investigate Li Yi's case from 14 years ago, the only person from the Ministry of Personnel who had personally witnessed the incident died of old age. Even if Li Qing didn't kill those people for revenge, they would probably die in the next few days due to various reasons. There were too many people who didn't want them to find out the truth of the incident. Li Yi's main crime back then was treason with the enemy. The officials from the Ministry of Personnel accused him of leaking important secrets of the imperial court to a certain demon nation. This led to the Department of Imperial Offerings suffering heavy losses in the war with the demon nation. Almost all of them were wiped out. Because of this case, Li Yi's entire family was exterminated. Only one daughter escaped because she was not in the divine capital. There was no way to find out the truth of what had happened back then. Even the most powerful cultivators could not divine a trace of the heavenly secrets. It was too difficult to overturn the case for him. Ministry of Personnel. Left Assistant Minister Chen Jian clasped his hands at a middle-aged man and said with a smile, "Minister, don't worry. Even if they investigate again, they won't find anything." The person standing in front of him was the Minister of Personnel, Xiao Yun. At the same time, he was also the Duke of Nanyang, a core member of the old party. More than 10 years ago, he was still the right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Now he was the head of the Ministry of Personnel. He looked at Qin Jian and asked, "Are you sure you didn't miss anything?" Qin Jian smiled and said, "Originally there were quite a few of them, but they were all killed by Li Yi's daughter." Does this count as lifting a rock and smashing one's own foot? This official would like to know what expression she would have if she knew about this. The Minister of Personnel nodded and said, "That's good." In the Imperial Ancestral Temple, Li Qing lowered her head in self-blame and said, "I'm sorry. If it wasn't for me, they might have had a chance." Li Mu comforted her and said, "You don't have to blame yourself. Even without you, they wouldn't have survived these few days. Those people wouldn't have let them live. Don't worry, I'll think of something." Li Mu was most worried that Li Qing would feel guilty and blame herself. After comforting her, he walked out of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and met Zhou Xian outside the temple. Zhou Xian looked at him indifferently and said, "Give up. If this goes on, Li Yi's ending will be your ending." Li Mu looked at him and turned to leave. Zhou Xian asked, "You really don't want to give up?" Li Mu looked back at him and said in a deep voice, "I'm not you. I will never give up on her. Never." Zhou Xian looked at Li Mu's departing figure until it disappeared from his sight. Only then did a faint smile appear at the corner of his mouth. From afar, one could see that his figure was slightly hunched as if he had put down something important. Ziwei Palace. There wasn't anything important in today's morning court. Li Yi's case, which had been a hot topic for the past few days, became the focus of the court's discussion. Although the court had ordered a reinvestigation of this case, even with the combined efforts of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and the Supreme Court, they couldn't find a single clue. After all, 14 years had passed since this case. Almost all the clues had disappeared in the river of time. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to find a new clue. In the Great Hall, the left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, the evidence for Li Yi's case was conclusive back then. Investigating it now is already an exception. We can't keep wasting the court's resources because of this case." The Minister of Works, Zhou Chuan, also stepped forward and said, "The Fulu school wants to investigate this case. The court has already satisfied them and given them an explanation. The court has its dignity and can't be forced by them." The officials of the new party and the old party had already spoken. Their wishes represented the wishes of most of the court. If His Majesty still insisted, it would damage the court's dignity and the officials in the court would not agree. At this moment, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xian, also stepped forward. The officials in the court already knew that the new party and the old party had joined forces to settle Li Yi's case. Under everyone's gaze, Zhou Xian walked to the center of the court, took off his official hat and slowly knelt down. When the officials saw this, they were all stunned. Lord Zhou why is he kneeling? Why did he take off his official hat? The officials were in an uproar. In front of the crowd, Prince Zhou stared blankly at the kneeling Zhou Xian and muttered, "Good fellow." Zhou Xian knelt on the ground and placed his official hat beside him. He touched the ground with his head and said loudly, "I'm guilty." Chapter 365. The strange behavior of the Assistant Minister of Justice caused the atmosphere in the hall to explode. What is Assistant Minister Zhou saying? He's guilty? What crime did he commit? This can't be. Good heavens, does he want to die? In the imperial court, some people quickly realized something and looked at Zhou Xian with astonished eyes, their faces full of shock. There were very few fools in the imperial court. In the blink of an eye, countless people had guessed Zhou Xian's motive. Where the officials from the Ministry of Personnel were, the expressions of the three people changed. Zhou Chuan's expression also changed. Qin Jian's face was pale as he thought to himself, "Impossible, impossible, he will die if he does this." At this moment Zhou Xian, who was kneeling on the ground, spoke again. Zhou Xian spoke in a deep voice. 14 years ago I was bewitched by Qin Jian, the imperial physician of the Ministry of Personnel, Gao Hong, and the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Shao Yun, to frame the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi, for treason. Qin Jian could not allow him to continue. He strode forward and said loudly, "Zhou Xian, what are you talking about? Do you know what the punishment is for framing an official of the imperial court?" Zhou Xian said indifferently, "So you also know that framing an official of the imperial court is a serious crime." He raised his head and said, "Everything I said is true. I am willing to accept the soul search." A rank 4 official was willing to accept the soul search. This was enough to prove that what he said was true. Zhou Xian's words caused the imperial court to fall silent for a moment. Then it became noisy again. Since he wants to confess, why did he wait until today? You can't tell. Before today, who would have thought that the imperial court would reopen this case? But why did he do this? Back then he framed Li Yi, but today he confessed. Zhou Xian didn't make a difference to what happened back then. Even without him, Li Yi's ending wouldn't have changed. In my opinion, he wanted to use this opportunity to gain the trust of the old party and enter the inner circle of the old party. It was all for today's betrayal. 14 years. He was so patient and loyal to the old party for 14 years, just to commit a crime for his brother? King Shou looked at Zhou Xian and sighed. He actually endured for 14 years. This Zhou Xian is truly a man. Realizing the current situation, he covered his mouth and coughed lightly. He gritted his teeth and said, "This person is really sinister." Li Mu, who was standing in the crowd, was also shocked. Zhou Xian's actions were completely out of his expectations. He recalled what Zhou Xian had said to him in front of the ancestral temple yesterday and seemed to have understood something. It turned out that he had already made his decision at that time. Li Mu thought that Zhou Xian was someone who would give up everything for his political ideals. He would commit crimes for Li Yi Li Qing's life and death, or even his own life and death, compared to some of his ideals were not worth mentioning. However, Zhou Xian's actions today overturned Li Mu's understanding of him. Behind the curtain, the Empress's voice could be heard. "Arrest Zhou Xian and all the people involved in this case. Bring them to the Imperial Clan Temple and have them interrogate by the 3 provinces." Although Li Yi's case was not investigated, once something was found, no one would be able to cover it up in front of everyone. During the morning assembly, 2 ministers and 3 assistant ministers were arrested. Other than that, there were also some people involved in the case who were not in the assembly. The internal guards were immediately ordered to arrest them. No one would have thought that this matter would have such a huge turn of events. Those people who framed Li Yi all those years ago thought that victory was in their hands, but they didn't expect that there would be a spy among them. From the beginning to the end, Zhou Xian was not on the same side as them. He had endured for 14 years waiting for this day. His counterattack caught both the old and new parties off guard. Although 14 years had passed since they framed a rank 4 imperial court official and caused extremely serious consequences, each and every one of them would not be able to escape death according to the law. In the imperial clan temple, a few of them had their powers sealed and were sent to prison to await trial by the 3 provinces. This case involved a lot of people and no department had the ability to investigate it alone. Li Mu walked into the most luxurious prison. Li Qing woke up from her meditation and asked softly, "What happened outside? Why is it so noisy?" Li Mu opened his mouth but didn't know what to say for a moment. After organizing his words he said slowly, "Just now in the assembly, Zhou Xian admitted in front of His Majesty and hundreds of officials that he was involved in framing your father. Now, the Minister of Personnel, the Minister of Works, and the left and right Assistant Ministers of Personnel have all been arrested." Li Qing said anxiously, "He did not frame father. He did all this for their dreams. One day he could reverse the verdict for father." Li Mu nodded and said, "I know. You don't have to worry. I will report this matter to His Majesty. Although this is not enough to pardon him, he should be able to avoid death." Although Zhou Xian's actions were pardonable, he could not be completely forgiven by the law just because he was pardonable. After all, he was still considered one of the main culprits back then. Seeing that he had voluntarily confessed to the crime and confessed to being an accomplice, according to the law he could be spared. Of course, no matter what, after this incident he could no longer be an official. After a while, Li Mu walked out of Li Qing's prison and came to another place. Zhou Xian was imprisoned here. He was imprisoned separately from the others. Li Mu stood outside the prison and said, "I thought you would not stand up." Zhou Xian looked at him and said, "If you could really find out anything, why would I stand up?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "This is not your style. If you want to achieve your dreams, you have to protect yourself. This is what you taught me." Zhou Xian was silent for a moment and said slowly, "But this may be his only chance. If he misses it, there will be no chance for him to regain his innocence." 14 years had passed since Li Yi's case. If the case was closed a second time, it would be impossible to overturn the case in the future. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "So you gave up on your dreams?" Zhou Xian's gaze was deep as he said calmly, "The flame of dreams will never be extinguished. As long as the flame is still there, the flame will be passed on forever." In another prison cell, with the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel as the leader, the few of them had ugly expressions. Not long after, the door of the prison cell was opened and 3 more people were pushed in. Qin Jian's face was pale as he said, "Marquis Zhongyong, Count Pingon, Marquis Yong. You have all been captured too?" The 3 of them were shocked when they saw the few people in the prison cell. After realizing something, they said in shock, "Could it be?" Qin Jian gritted his teeth and said, "That damned Zhou Xian betrayed all of us." After understanding the whole story, the 3 of them had completely gloomy expressions. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Gao Hong, sighed and said, "If Zhou Xian's soul is searched and he reveals what happened back then, the few of us will probably be sentenced to death." Qin Jian said, "We are all grasshoppers on the same rope. We must think of a way or else it will be difficult for us to escape death." The Marquis Zhongyong shook his head and said, "Death is impossible. My family still has a death exemption medallion bestowed by the late emperor. As long as I don't rebel, no one can punish me." The Count Pingon also sighed, "It's a pity that the medallion passed down by my father is gone. I originally wanted to pass it down from generation to generation." The Marquis Yongding had a pained expression as he said, "My family's medallion probably can't be kept. That damned Zhou Xian, if it wasn't for his bewitchment back then, the 3 of us wouldn't have participated in this matter." Qin Jian said in shock, "All of you have death exemption medallions?" The Marquis Yongding nodded and then looked at the 3 people opposite him and said, "Not only us, the late emperor also bestowed one to the Duke of Nanyang. Although Assistant Minister Gao didn't have one, concubine Gao should also have one. She wouldn't not save her brother." The Minister of Personnel glanced at Zhou Chuan, who was in the corner, and said indifferently, "The Zhou family's 2 death exemption medallions have already been used last time. I wonder if the Empress will spare Minister Zhou." Zhou Chuan looked at him and said indifferently, Unfortunately, father-in-law gave that medallion to my wife before he passed away. Qin Jian looked at the people around him in a daze and felt that he didn't fit in with them. Out of the 7 people standing here, only he didn't have a death exemption medallion? The Minister of Personnel saw his worry and said, "Don't worry, the late emperor bestowed 13 medallions and we have already used 12 of them. If I remember correctly, the last medallion should be in the hands of Prince Zhou." Hearing Prince Zhou's name, Qin Jian heaved a sigh of relief and immediately said to the jailer outside the door, "Quickly go and report that I want to see Prince Zhou." Not long later, Prince Zhou walked over slowly. Qin Jian grabbed the bars of the cell and said hurriedly, "Prince Zhou, you must save me." A moment later, after hearing his words, Prince Zhou smiled and said, "What kind of relationship do we have? Everyone is doing this for the Xiao family. Isn't it just a medallion? I will give it to you." Qin Jian heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." Prince Zhou touched his waist with one hand and his expression suddenly changed. He said in shock, "Where is my medallion? Where did my big medallion go?" Chapter 366. Prince Zhou touched his body and said regretfully, "I seem to have lost my token." Qin Jian grabbed the bars of the cell and said with a trembling voice, "Prince Zhou, please don't scare me. This concerns my life." Prince Zhou thought for a while and said, "Well, I'll go back and look for it. It shouldn't be lost. You wait here and I'll tell you when I find it." Seeing Prince Zhou leave quickly, Qin Jian leaned against the wall weakly. He looked at the other people in the cell talking and laughing. The atmosphere was very lively. But the lively atmosphere was theirs and he had nothing. Although they were in the same cell, they were not the same. At the same time, in another cell, Zhou Xian said slowly, "Back then he and I offended the interests of the upper class and strongly opposed the death exemption token issued by the late emperor. The courtiers and the emperor could not tolerate us. He was framed for treason. Although there was not enough evidence, what they needed was just a reason. Before he died, he entrusted Qing'er to me and asked me to protect myself first and then slowly complete our great cause." "For our great cause we can give up everything?" Li Mu asked. "This is the reason why you gave up on her?" Zhou Xian nodded and said, "At least before you moved to Fulu school, I had no other choice." This was the reason why Li Mu had been guarding against Zhou Xian. This kind of person had a firm goal and was extremely rational. In their eyes, family and friends were not as important as their great cause. They could sacrifice themselves at any time. Li Mu admired his patience and ambition, but he would not get too close to this kind of person. He looked at Zhou Xian and asked, "You made a choice in the end?" Zhou Xian looked at Li Mu and said, "This is not a choice. I believe that if I didn't finish it, someone will do it for me and do it better." Li Mu said, "Don't look at me like that." Zhou Xian continued, "Back then the late emperor gave out 13 gold medallions. He tried his best to abolish it, but he incurred the displeasure of the late emperor and died because of it. All these years, 3 of the 13 gold medallions have been used up. Including the old concubine's gold medallion and the Zhou family's gold medallion, there are 7 left. Among these 7 medallions, 6 will be used up this time. The last one is in the hands of Prince Zhou. These things shouldn't have existed from the beginning to the end. In the future we will probably never see them again." Having said this, he leaned against the wall and sat down. He closed his eyes and said, "You can go. I'm already very tired. The prison of the Imperial Clan Temple is a good place to sleep." As soon as he finished speaking, his breathing calmed down and he actually fell asleep. Li Mu slowly walked out of the prison. In the courtyard of the Imperial Clan Temple, Prince Zhou and Zhang Chun were playing dice under the shade of a tree. King Zhou's gambling luck had always been bad. In front of Zhang Chun, there was already a pile of silver fragments. After losing another round, King Zhou searched his chest and sleeves. Finally, he couldn't find a single piece of silver. Zhang Chun kept the silver fragments and said, "Why don't we stop here today and wait for the next round when you have enough money?" King Zhou slammed a piece of gold on the table and said, "Who are you looking down on? Let's continue. I'm going to win back all the money I lost last time." Zhang Chun looked at the piece of gold and said in surprise, "This piece of gold, why does it look so familiar?" Li Mu looked at it from afar and also felt that it looked familiar. This piece of gold was squarish. Other than the fact that there were no words on it, it looked like it was carved from the same mold as the death exemption medallion. King Zhou glanced at Li Mu from afar and asked, "Little Li, are you coming?" 15 minutes later, Li Mu carried the gold and left the Imperial Clan Temple. He planned to melt this thing when he returned. This thing wasn't light and should be enough to make a few pieces of jewelry. He would give one to Lu Hanyan, one to Li Qing and two to Wan Wan and Xiaobai. If there was any left he could give it to the Empress. At this moment, the entire Shindu was in an uproar because of something. Today Li Yi's case, which affected the hearts of countless people, had a shocking turn of events. The first person to suggest reinvestigating the case was Li Mu from the Central Secretariat. He felt that it was unfair for Li Yi back then and wanted to reverse the case for him, but he was rejected by the imperial court. After that, people from the Fulu school in the northern county came and forced the imperial court to pay attention to this case. On the surface, the case was reinvestigated because of the Fulu school. However, the officials living in the northern courtyard saw the head of the Fulu school entering and leaving the Li residence on the day of Li Mu's wedding. It was obvious who was behind this matter. The commoners did not know what happened after that, but they roughly knew that the imperial court did not find out anything about the old case. There were also voices of opposition in the imperial court. If there were no accidents, this matter would be left unsettled in the end. However, no one had expected that the case would take such a huge turn. Zhou Xian, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, who was a core member of the old party and had made many contributions to the old party over the past decade, admitted in front of all the officials and His Majesty that he had conspired with the old party to frame Li Yi back then. He had single-handedly sent the masterminds of the old case to the Zongjing temple. Among these people were 2 ministers of the 6 ministries and 2 assistant ministers. This was the case that had the greatest impact on the court in all these years and involved the widest range of people. And this was only the mastermind. If the accomplices were included, who knew how many people in the court would be implicated? However, why did Zhou Xian do this became a mystery in the hearts of the people. Did Zhou Xian lose his mind? Not only did he court death, but he also pulled in his accomplices. I don't understand, I really don't understand. That's right, what do you think he's after? Did something go wrong in his cultivation and he was invaded by his inner demons, causing him to go crazy? In my opinion, it might be because of the unequal distribution of benefits that caused internal strife. In the entire divine capital, everyone in the streets, taverns and tea houses were discussing this matter. No matter how they thought about it, they could not imagine that the people who framed Li Yi back then were not found by the imperial court. Instead, they were wiped out because of internal strife. As for why Zhou Xian did this, there were different opinions. Some said that he was invaded by his inner demons, some said that he had lost his mind, and some said that the old party had internal strife. In a restaurant somewhere, an old man could not listen anymore. He slammed his wine bowl on the table and said in a deep voice, "Did you forget that more than 10 years ago, other than Li Qingtian, there was also Zhou Qingtian in the divine capital?" "What Li Qingtian, Zhou Qingtian?" 14 years ago I was only 5 years old. I was still playing with P. I didn't know anything." "Old man, what are you talking about?" The young people in the restaurant were confused. A few of them who were over 30 years old seemed to have thought of something, and a look of realization appeared on their faces. More than 10 years ago, when the late emperor was still on the throne, it was the darkest period of the divine capital in their memories. At that time, the rich and powerful only needed to pay a fine to kill someone. At that time, it was not uncommon for the rich and powerful to kidnap women on the streets. At that time, the officials of the Great Zhou were corrupt and governance was chaotic. The people suffered greatly. The people of the divine capital would rather take a detour than walk past the government. Even during those dark times, there was still light in the divine capital. At that time, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi, punished the corrupt officials and brought justice to the officials of the divine capital. The director of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xian, redressed the grievances of the people. The two of them persuaded the late emperor to abolish the Silver Penalty Act and stopped him from giving out the gold medallion. At that time, they were one of the few rays of light in the hearts of the people of the divine capital. They were known as Qingtian. However, this situation did not last for long. Later, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi, was accused of treason and his entire family was killed. At that time, the people of the divine capital could not accept this result. Assistant Minister Li was righteous and loved the people like his own children. How could he be a treacherous official? What made it even more difficult for the people to accept was that the director of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xian, was one of the officials who accused him. They used to admire Zhou Xian, but later on they hated him as much. After Assistant Minister Li's death, Zhou Xian quickly sided with the old party and became their lackey. A few years later he was promoted to the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Over the years he protected many people from the old party and helped the old party fight against dissidents and the new party. Soon he became the core of the old party. For more than 10 years, the people who were grateful to Li Yi would spit at the Ministry of Justice when they passed by to vent their hatred. However, no one expected that more than 10 years later, Zhou Xian would stand up for Li Yi in the imperial court without hesitation and reverse the verdict. Someone finally recalled and said in disbelief, "Could it be that Lord Zhou has been enduring humiliation for the past 14 years just for this day?" That's right. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. Why would he give up the power he already had? Could it be that we've been wrong about Lord Zhou all these years? Lord Li and Lord Zhou are brothers of different surnames. Back then Lord Zhou must have known that he couldn't save Lord Li, so he went undercover in the old party and gained their trust. He waited for the right time to reverse the verdict for Lord Li and give those people a fatal blow. 14 years he was scolded by us for 14 whole years. How much has he been wronged all these years? The truth of what happened back then had been revealed. Many people were filled with regret and their respect for Zhou Xian was even greater than before. Li Mu's residence. When Li Mu used the true samadhi fire to burn the gold cake, he realized that it was only coated with a layer of gold powder on the surface. The inside was black and looked like iron but not iron. He did not know what it was. Li Mu then threw it into the flask heaven dimension. Prince Shou actually used a gold-plated fake to trick him. He had to be more careful when gambling with him in the future. At the same time, in the Imperial Clan Temple, Prince Shou sighed and walked to the front of the prison cell. He looked at Qin Jian apologetically and said, "Assistant Minister Qin, I'm really sorry. I've searched everywhere for that death exemption golden medallion but couldn't find it. It should have really been lost. Don't worry. Every year on your death anniversary I'll get people to burn more paper money for you." Chapter 367. Of course, the material used to make the death exemption golden medallion was not ordinary metal. Li Mu had asked Hyun Jinko about it. According to Hyun Jinko, the metal in his hand was a piece of meteoric metal. In the cultivation world, meteoric metal was called meteoric metal. It was a metal that did not exist in the 10 continents. It was extremely tough and was most suitable for refining weapons. It was one of the main materials for refining heaven-grade magic treasures. Therefore Li Mu found a new box and put it away. It might be useful in the future. Then he began to think about something. Although Zhou Xian's suicide attack was useful, according to the law, he himself could not escape the death penalty. Of course, Li Mu could not watch him die. After thinking about it, he left the house and walked toward the palace. At the same time, in the southern courtyard, it was a mansion with more than 10 entrances. Several figures gathered together. They did not look happy. "I've told you that Zhou Xian is a traitor. We can't trust him easily. Now, not only have we lost control of the Ministry of Justice, but we've also given away the entire Ministry of Personnel. What's the point of saying all this now? Who knew that Zhou Xian would be so cunning? He seemed to listen to us on the surface, but he always had evil intentions. He destroyed all our years of hard work. Preposterous. I can't take this lying down." The people present were all members of the Shao royal family. They were all furious that Zhou Xian had betrayed them. At this moment one of them looked at King Shou and asked, "Fourth brother, don't you still have a death exemption golden medallion? Give it to Qin Jian. He has been loyal to us for many years. Even if he didn't make any contributions, he still worked hard." King Shou spread his hands and said, "I lost that death exemption golden medallion." "What? You lost it? Where did you lose it? You actually lost such an important thing? What else can you do?" King Shou shrugged and said helplessly, "I can swear to the heavens that the death exemption golden medallion is no longer in my hands. Perhaps this is his fate." "You really lost it? You really lost it? Have you searched for it?" "I tried using an object-seeking talisman but I couldn't find it." "Look at you, other than drinking tea, listening to operas and gambling with dice, what else can you do? How did our Shao clan end up with you?" "I forget it. Whether Qin Jian dies or not, I don't care. But Zhou Xian must die. If he doesn't die, he will forever be a disgrace to our Shao clan. Anyone can survive, but Zhou Xian must die." Send this letter to the Zhou family. They should know what to do. Didn't he want to overthrow Li Yi? I would like to see who will save him this time. In the Chang'e Palace, Li Mu prepared the dishes for the empress. He also poured fresh and fragrant tribute tea into a jade cup and placed it beside her hand. Zhou Yi said, "There are no outsiders here. You can sit down too." Li Mu said, "I'll just stand. If your majesty has any orders, please call me." Zhou Yi glanced at him and asked, "Why are you so good to me today?" Li Mu asked, "Did I not treat your majesty well in the past?" Zhou Yi was speechless for a moment, then said, "That's not what I meant." Then she said softly, "Sit down. I don't want to eat alone." Li Mu sat opposite her and accompanied her to eat for a while. At a certain moment he raised his head and asked, "Your Majesty, how do you plan to deal with Zhou Xian?" Zhou Yi said, "According to the law, he should be beheaded." Li Mu quickly said, "But he turned himself in and confessed all his accomplices. It can be considered meritorious. Shouldn't he be given a light sentence?" Zhou Yi took a memorial from the side and handed it to him, saying, "This is the memorial that the secretariat just handed over. Take a look." Li Mu opened the memorial. From the signature, it was handed over by an official of the new party. In this report, there was a detailed list of cases where Zhou Xian had covered up for the officials of the old party over the years. A single case was not a big deal, but when all of them were put together, it was enough to convict him of the felony of bending the law for personal gain. This crime could be heavy or light. If it was light, it could be a forfeit of salary. If it was heavy, it could be beheaded. In the past 10 years, in order to gain the trust of the old party, Zhou Xian used the power in his hands to cover up many officials of the old party. He also violated the law and did many things that were beneficial to the old party. They were all listed in this memorial. Perhaps only the old party itself could understand these things in such detail. It seemed that Zhou Xian's behavior of harming himself and hurting the enemy had thoroughly angered the people behind the old party. The old and new parties joined forces to put him to death. In order to execute Zhou Xian, the old party even exposed some of their own scandals and sacrificed some people. The purpose was to make Zhou Xian's death irreversible. Zhou Yi picked up a piece of tofu and slowly ate it before saying, "These crimes added together are enough for him to die twice." Li Mu picked up his chopsticks and put them down, saying, "I think that although Zhou Xian violated the law in the past, there is a reason behind it that cannot be ignored. His good friend was wronged and died tragically. He had no way to seek justice through the imperial court and the late emperor. How desperate was that? In order to redress his good friend's case, he violated morality and endured humiliation until today. He is praised and respected by the people. If the imperial court does not care about the reason and sentences him to death, I'm afraid that people will not be convinced." Zhou Yi glanced at him and asked, "So, you are here to plead for him?" Li Mu looked at her eagerly. "Your Majesty," Zhou Yi said helplessly. All right, I promise you." Li Mu's appetite suddenly improved. If he had known that acting coquettishly could settle this matter, he would not have thought of so many reasons. Perhaps this was what it meant to be fearless when one was favored. For this favor, Li Mu was willing to be her intimate cotton jacket for the rest of his life. Zhou Yi added, "I can only save his life. In the future he will no longer be the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice and will need to stay away from Luoyang." Li Mu said, "As long as you can keep him alive, that is enough." After serving the empress, Li Mu walked out of Chang'e Palace and let out a long sigh of relief. Li Mu had already reached the limit of what he could do by not executing Zhou Xian directly. It was also considered an explanation to Li Qing. If he made any further requests, it would be difficult for the empress. Of course, she was the empress. Her words were the law. It was not impossible for her to pardon Zhou Xian and Li Qing directly. However, Li Mu still hoped that the imperial court would maintain order. He would not let the empress walk down the same path as the previous emperor. Imperial Secretariat. The head of the Imperial Secretariat, the head of the Imperial Secretariat, the head of the Ministry of Justice, and the servants gathered to judge Zhou Xian. In fact, there was nothing much to try in this case. The soul-searching technique was not difficult for the presiding judges. With Zhou Xian's active cooperation, the details of the case were revealed at a glance. Li Yi's crime of treason was purely a false accusation. Among them, the officials of the Ministry of Personnel Zhou Chuan, the Marquis of Zhongyong, the Duke of Ping'an and the Marquis of Yongding were the masterminds of the case. According to the law, they should be executed. However, among these 7 people, 6 of them had a gold medallion. A gold medallion bestowed by the previous emperor could exempt them from all crimes except for rebellion. They would be stripped of their official and noble positions, but they could keep their lives. Even so, this was a huge blow to the imperial court. Out of the 6 ministers, 2 of them were executed in this case alone. None of the 3 main officials of the Ministry of Personnel were left. Just filling up the vacant positions was a huge headache for the 3 provinces. However, the outcome was already decided. If the case was not investigated, then so be it. No matter how much injustice Li Yi had suffered, as long as the imperial court did not investigate, there would be nothing. As long as the imperial court did not investigate, the ministers of the Ministry of Personnel were still ministers, and the assistant ministers were still assistant ministers. They were still important officials and pillars of the imperial court. However, since the imperial court had investigated, no matter what the outcome was, they had to accept it. The other 6 were already prepared. After the 3 provinces made their verdicts, the 6 gold medallions were placed on the table of the imperial secretariat. Only the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel Xianxia sat on the floor and muttered, "I'm so stupid. I only knew that I was with you to frame Li Yi, but I didn't know that all of you had gold medallions except for me. I regret it, I really regret it." After sentencing the masterminds, the left assistant minister asked, "How should we deal with Zhou Xian?" The right assistant minister said, "Based on the crimes he has committed over the years, he should be executed." The left assistant minister looked at Zhou Jing and asked, "What do you think, Lord Zhou?" Zhou Jing said, "I am deeply ashamed that my younger brother framed a loyal official. I will leave the following matters to the 3 of you." With that, he slowly walked out of the imperial secretariat. The head of the imperial secretariat shook his head and said, "I am also a little tired. You 2 can do as you see fit." With that, he also left with his hands behind his back. The left and right assistants looked at each other and exchanged glances. Zhou Xian had single-handedly turned the imperial court into a mess. After this incident, both the new and old parties hoped that Zhou Xian would disappear forever. His disappearance would be a good thing for the imperial court. The left assistant minister cleared his throat and said, "If that's the case, then..." At this moment, Mr. Mei walked in from outside and said, "His Majesty has decreed that the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xian, tried to redress his friend's innocence. Although it is pardonable, it is not pardonable by law. From today onwards, he is stripped of his position as Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice and will be banished to the army." The 2 assistants looked at each other again and bowed at the same time. "Yes, Your Majesty." Although banishment to the army was lighter than the death penalty, it was still more severe than exile. Moreover, the place of banishment was near the borders of the demon nation or the netherworld. It was desolate and dangerous. Even if the banished person did not die under the blade of the executioner, he would die under the hands of the demon ghosts. The difference was that the latter way of dying was to protect the great Zhou. It was more heroic than the former way of dying. Criminals who were banished to the army were usually used as cannon fodder. Even if they were at the 5th realm, they would not survive. This ending should be enough to satisfy those people. At the Imperial Clan Temple. "You are not righteous. You will not die a good death. You will not die a good death." When Qin Jian was escorted into the Imperial Clan Temple's prison again, he could not help but roar with grief and indignation. Zhang Chun sat under the shade of a tree and shook his head. "If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place?" King Shou sighed and said, "The heavenly Tao is clear. There will always be people who have to pay the price for their past mistakes. Although the imperial court is big, it cannot tolerate animals." Zhang Chun looked at King Shou in surprise. He said in surprise, "I can't believe you would say something like that, Your Highness." King Shou waved his hand and said, "This is something I learned from the opera. It's based on my feelings. It's not targeted at anyone. Come, let's continue. Today I will win back all that I lost in the past." Chapter 368. Due to Assistant Minister Zhou Xian's public confession, the left Assistant Minister Li Yi of the Ministry of Personnel, who was framed for treason 14 years ago, was finally vindicated today. A rank 4 official of the imperial court was exterminated because of false accusations. This was a great insult to the imperial court and the great Zhou. Although His Majesty had issued a decree to declare Lord Li's innocence, what had happened could never be undone. Outside the imperial city, the commoners were filled with righteous indignation when they saw the notice posted on the city wall. The culprits from back then could have been pardoned with the death exemption medallion. Why was Lord Zhou banished? Lord Li was loyal to the emperor and his country. In the end, the lives of his family were worth less than a few broken medallions? The reality is even more absurd than the dramas. How sad, how sad. Have you seen the new drama Zhao's Orphan? It's clearly about Lord Li. Not yet. Hearing you say that, I'll have to go and take a look. In a mansion in the southern courtyard, the Duke of Nanyang, who had been pardoned with the death exemption medallion but lost his position as the Minister of Personnel, frowned deeply and said in a gloomy voice, "Zhou Xian is only banished. These crimes are enough for him to die twice. His Majesty is obviously siding with him." A person beside him said, "Forget it. It's just a matter of time. How many of the criminals who have been banished have been able to live for more than half a year?" The Duke of Nanyang said indignantly, "I can't take this lying down. Took me more than 10 years to climb to this position. Because of Zhou Xian I have nothing now. I can't wait to kill him." That person was silent for a moment before saying, "Even if you want to kill him, you can't do it now. Once he leaves the capital, no one will care if he's dead or alive. Right now there's another important matter." The Duke of Nanyang asked, "What is it?" The person said, "Have you forgotten that Li Yi's daughter is still imprisoned in the imperial clan temple?" After being reminded by him, Commandery Prince Nanyang recalled that this matter had started because Li Yi's daughter had assassinated 5 imperial court officials to avenge her father. This had triggered the old case. However, in recent days his attention had been focused on the old case and he had completely forgotten about this matter. That person continued, "During this period of time, that Li Mu went in and out of the Zongjing temple many times. He would visit this woman almost every day. Seems that they knew each other before. The reason he wanted to reverse the verdict for Li Yi was probably because of this woman." Royal Prince Nanyang narrowed his eyes and said, "These are 2 completely different cases. I would like to see how Li Mu will save her, unless he can convince His Majesty to grant him a death exemption medallion." The person next to him had a playful smile on his face as he said, "A large part of the reason for Li Yi's death was because he opposed the death exemption golden medallion. If he used the death exemption golden medallion to save that woman, then it would be the biggest joke. If he didn't use the death exemption golden medallion, then the woman would be dead. What choice would he make?" Royal Prince Nanyang asked, "What if he really begs His Majesty to grant him the death exemption golden medallion? Bewitching the Son of Heaven, treacherous officials who will harm the country." Murderous intent appeared in that person's eyes as he said, "Clean up the Emperor's subordinates and punish treacherous officials." Northern County. Countless people gathered under the city walls and looked at the notice posted on the city walls. They were pointing and discussing. Most of the commoners were illiterate and only came to join in the fun. They did not know what was going on. Someone scratched his head and asked, "Is there anyone who is illiterate? Help me take a look. What is written on this notice?" "Let me take a look." A middle-aged scholar squeezed into the crowd. After looking at the notice he said, "It says that more than 10 years ago, there was a high-ranking official who served the country and the people in the divine capital. Because he offended the nobles, he was framed for treason and his entire family was executed. A few days ago the imperial court cleared his name." The northern county was far away from the divine capital. The commoners did not know what happened in the divine capital, nor did they know the high-ranking officials in the divine capital. However, someone was confused and said, "Why does this sound like the play that the Union Pavilion put on a few days ago?" The middle-aged scholar sighed and said, "This play was actually written for him. This Lord Li used to be a good official who was loved by the commoners. In the divine capital he was called Li Qingtian by the commoners. Unfortunately he always worked for the commoners and went against the nobles. After offending the nobles, he was framed and his entire family was exterminated. He was wronged for more than 10 years. If not for his daughter avenging her father by killing the officials who framed him back then and alerting the imperial court, no one would have cleared his name." There's actually such a thing? It's even more dramatic than a play. Even I want to watch that play. Unfortunately, I don't have the money. Who did not like to listen to plays? However, to the commoners, being able to eat and wear was already a luxury. Wouldn't it be better to spend a few coins to buy steamed rice? Spending money to listen to plays was the life of the rich. At this moment someone asked, "Don't you know that the Yunyan Pavilion is not paying for the plays these days?" Someone was shocked. "There's such a good thing?" It's not just the Yunyan Pavilion. In the past few days, there's also a stage set up by the official road outside the city. It's free to perform. Those who have the money can attend it. Those who don't have the money can also attend it. So the stage at the city gate is for watching plays. If they said that it's free, I would have gone to watch it. Let's go together. Wait for me. The commoners did not have much entertainment, so they were naturally happy to watch a play that they could watch for free. The Yunyan Pavilion's theater was filled to the brim. The area around the stage outside the city was also filled with commoners. It was the slack period, so there were not many opportunities like this. The commoners in the surrounding area carried stools before the sun rose. The play was called The Orphan of the Zhou Family. It told the story of an official of the Zhou family from the previous dynasty. Because he often sought justice for the commoners, he offended the nobles in the capital. He was framed by a treacherous official and his family was exterminated. The surviving orphan of the Zhou family endured for many years to avenge his family. The story of the play was twisted and bizarre, with climax after climax. At the end, the orphan of the Zhou family killed the treacherous official with his own hands to avenge his father. It was so satisfying that the commoners could not help but think of Daoist's injustice. The commoners loved to watch plots where good had good karma and evil had evil retribution. This was not the only reason why the play was so popular. It was also because the content of the play was not fabricated. Instead, it was based on the original. The official of the Zhou family in the play was Li Yi, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, whose entire family was exterminated because of the crime of treason. The empress had already informed the 36 counties of the Great Zhou of his injustice. Most of the commoners knew about it. He's already dead. What's the use of redressing the injustice? Why can those people still use the death exemption golden medallion to save their lives? They should all be buried with that lord. It's a pity that the imperial court is controlled by those people. That lord's daughter had no way to redress the injustice. She was forced to take revenge on those corrupt officials. I wonder how the imperial court will deal with her? What else can they do? They'll definitely give her the death penalty. After all, she violated the law. *T the law. Is the law used to protect the murderer? The law can't give justice to others, but it doesn't allow them to seek justice for themselves. Why can those people continue to enjoy glory, splendor, and wealth after framing others and destroying their families? Why can't even leave behind the last bloodline of those who were wrongfully killed? What kind of *T justice is this? The imperial court announced this to the world and let the commoners of the 36 counties know about this matter. They originally wanted to give justice to Li Yi. Unexpectedly, after the commoners learned about the inside story, they became even angrier. The official who was framed for treason was redressed, but what about those who harmed him back then? They were still alive and well and continued to be people above others. However, that lord's only descendant was going to be executed. What was the point of such redressing? The so-called law was only used to restrain the commoners. Those nobles could treat the law as nothing. With a token, they could avoid the death penalty. In their eyes, the commoners were no different from livestock that could be killed at will. Under such anger, someone finally could not help but say, if that lord's bloodline is cut off, there will really be no justice. Why don't we protest the imperial court with blood and protect that lord's bloodline? As soon as this was said, it immediately received the response of many people below the stage. Agree. Count me in. My family sells cloth. I'll pay for the cloth used for the bloodletter. I'll go back and ask the village chief to mobilize the entire village. In just a short day, there was a bloodletter movement in the North County. The angry commoners ran around and tens of thousands of commoners pressed their fingerprints on the white cloth. Regarding this, the North County government watched from the sidelines. At the same time in Yantai County, a few commoners walked out of the theater and discussed among themselves. So County Officer Yu is the prototype of the villain in the play. He really deserves to die. To think that I felt sad for him. He framed a good person in exchange for a promotion. Too hateful. I heard that someone outside the city wrote a blood letter to protest the imperial court. I'm going. Do you want to come? Let's go. Yushan County. So this is the reason why the two lords died. The case back then has been investigated. Even if they didn't die, they would be beheaded by the imperial court. They deserved it. Danyang County. Nanyang County. Yuntai County. In just a few days, similar things happened in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou. After the local government learned of the inside story, to prevent civil unrest, they ordered the commoners to stop gathering. However, the letter was secretly passed down from village to village. Shindu. After the case was revealed, the punishment for the people involved in the case back then was quickly implemented. Other than a few main culprits, the officials who joined forces to impeach Li Yi back then were just following the trend. Now they were only fined their salaries and were not punished too much. Just by punishing a few main culprits, there was already a huge loophole in the 6 ministries. The 3 provinces were also in a mess. If the accomplices were to be held accountable one by one, the imperial court would probably completely collapse. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Chen Jian, had already been executed. As for the others, because they had the death exemption token, no one could do anything to them. In the hall of the secretariat, Li Mu opened a letter. The contents of the letter were about an official urging the imperial court to quickly deal with the assassination of the 5 officials.